What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Your Lake Fork Guide. It's time for Wednesday, so that means it is Guides Night, baby. It's Guides Night on Wednesday night. We've got a couple other guides coming in to join us tonight. We're going to talk about some bass fishing. Warming trend, Lake Fork bass fishing, spring 2025. It's going down, man. It's starting to like pieces coming together at a time. It's about to go off. There's about to be an explosion coming up pretty soon. Got a little different music choice tonight. One of my all-time favorites. Let's get it. Ha, 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 ha. Come on. It's a good time to be a bass fisherman. It's exciting right now. It's been, we like to keep it real around here. I've been a little bit spinning my head this week. Like, I've been chasing my tail this week. I've been a little lost. Hopefully some of our other guys have caught them a little better than I have, because last couple of days been a little rough on you, boy. I ain't gonna lie. It's been a little we caught fish, but been a little frustrating. So all right, there's all the musical goodness that comes with Your Lake Fork Guide. And you know what? Ever since we started using this software, I know the music sounds like crap, but it's a tradition to kick it off with music around here. So we're going to do it, even though it sounds not as good with this new software we're using. All right. Let me make sure I've got my link sent to my guys here to make sure they can get in. Yep, looks like they got, okay, so they should be able to get in here. So they should be making their way in pretty soon. Man, water temps are like changing pretty quick. Like some little like individual areas, water temp would change like a degree an hour, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. Like when you go in there and in 4 hours you go back in there and it's 5 degrees difference. Like that means you're going to get maybe up to an 8, 9, 10 degree swing in a day in a little skinny water area. That's a lot, man. That's a big difference. And then of course it goes back down some at night, because we're not having like we're having a warming trend, but we're not having like the real warming trend where the nighttime lows stay above the water temp. That's when you get like the real hard warming trends. We're not really having one of those, because some of our, maybe tonight we will, but the last couple of days we've had overnight lows that got kind of below the water temp in the shallow water areas. So it is warming, but it's doing a little bit of up and down. And man, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'll be straight up with you guys. Like, it's kind of had my head spinning. Like, things that I think they should be doing, we're not having success trying to catch them that way. So we're going to talk about it with some of the other guides in more detail. Got one of them just popped in here. We'll go ahead and get him on the stage. Y'all know him. Oh, Magic Mike McFarland. There he is.
That's right. That's right. You used to call me Magic Mike. Oh, Magic Mike.
Listen, I can't call you Magic Mike. It was just a joke. You know, that's like a movie you don't want to be like.
I know it. But it's funny that you wanted to introduce me comically, because I was going to say to do something the same. I had a bunch of people that have always said I'm very scientific and I'm like an Einstein at this. And I said, well, look, wait, put my glasses on here. And now you have Sir McEinstein ready to teach you about fishing.
Yeah.
Sir McEinstein. We're getting old, Mike Einstein.
Yeah, between you and David and his barometric pressure meter that he has in his pocket at all times, we're going to get it covered.
Hey, you know what? I will give David some kudos to that, but when we fish as much as we do, really want my point on that whole thing? It would be like Kevin Van Dam. Why would Kevin Van Dam be offshore fishing for non-active fish, but he's right next to his home run stuff on the main lake point with the rattle trap here in about an hour, because he's watching that moon phase and he's watching some of that stuff. Yeah. It may be the approach, but man, when you're fishing, just go fishing. But I had an old timer, Larry Mantle, cousin to Mickey Mantle, baseball player. And I was about 17, and Larry took me fishing. We ran up what's called the Humbug on Lake Pleasant. In the back of Humbug, it had wild animals, wild boar. I mean, not boar, burros, and then free-range cattle. And when we got to the back up there, he shuts down and pours his coffee You know, he was a seasoned veteran, retired almost from, John Murray. If you know who John Murray was, this was John Murray's mentor. So this guy was, like a legend. And he didn't jump up to fish. I said, what's going on? He said, you see those cattle in the burrows? They're laying down. He said, these fish are in these trees back here, but they won't bite right now because it's just not an on-active time. And I'm like, this dude's old fart don't know what he's talking about. Can I fish? He said, have at it. I jumped up and I run that trolling motor. And I run through those trees with a spinner bait, probably about 600-700 yards. He sat there and drank his coffee. And all of a sudden, after I don't know how long time it was, an hour, whatever, that boat moved. And I looked back. I said, you coming to fish, old man? And he said, look, the burros stood up. The cattle stood up. He said, yeah, give me my boat back. And I'll never forget, but he came up to me when he got up shoulder to shoulder with me on that trolling motor. He was an ass. And he bumped me. He had beat it. Get out my seat. He flipped the 180 of that boat and he went back to where he originally started. And he went through those same trees with a spinnerbait and caught fish.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, do we go out there and fish because animals are standing? No, we don't. You see cattle on fork hit the water. Those aren't free range cattle. Just because they're laying down that old junk and saying, the cattle are standing up, fish biting. No, but when Mother Nature is alive, deer are moving, squirrel are moving, there is some relevance. I'll close this and let Billy have it back. But in fishing, there's so many freaking elements. You could have all the deer moving, but it's raining and it's a cold front. The bass aren't happy. We just had ice and stuff. The deer got to eat. It's cold. They got to eat to keep them freezing. So deer are active and stuff. My squirrels are going crazy. My bass in my pond are frozen ass. They ain't doing shit.
Yeah,
my friend.
I mean, there's times when it lines up and it correlates, and there's times when it doesn't. And I think general activity levels are a good sign. Like for me, it's like if I'm driving to the lake and I see deer and pigs on the side of the road when I normally don't, I kind of get a little bit of, well, hey, maybe it's going to be a little more active today. Other than that, I don't put a whole lot into it as far as observing all that. I tell you what, my favorite do the cows feeding mean something for fishing story is I had one day where it was July and we had started at 6 a.m. and fished an area from where we were idling back out at, 7:15. And there was cows standing in the water up to their belly, on one of the areas that has a cow pasture on the shore on Fork. And the guy goes, hey, when those cows are up feeding like that, because there was other cows up feeding in the pasture. He goes, hey, when those cows are up feeding like that, I've heard that means the fish are biting. Is that what that means? I said, I don't know about that, but I do know this. When they're up to their belly in water at 7 o'clock, it's going to be hot, bud.
Yeah, it's a hot day. That's right. That sounds like Pac. Oh, Pac-Man, you say that. Pac-Man would see that and he'd chuckle. He'd say, hey, you know what them cattle and being in the water means? And you'd say, what, sir? He'd say, it's hot as hell.
Yeah. When they're that early, it's really bad. Yeah, you might want to think about
but I can still flash back to like Lake Mead. I guarantee you I could put a post out to my friends on the West Coast to talk about the U.S. Open, Lake Mead, for 30 years that fished it. And they would tell you in that massive 90-mile lake, if you can find where the fish are, okay, yeah, you're going to do well any part of the lake. But what's unique is every time you do find the groups of fish, the bighorn sheep will end up being in that same quarter mile, and you'll see them come down. And if you got bighorn sheep watering in front of you, you're on bass. It's crazy, but it just, whatever that is, who knows? I don't know. Don't overthink it. I will tell you, just like Billy said, sometimes it lines up, sometimes it doesn't. With shell bed fishing, same thing. A lot of times that moon face, Mark Pack would say it, I say it, the best, you got to be, if you got a good spot, and be on it on your best spot, be on it during those times. And sometimes you'll see where, holy crap, that really made a difference.
Yeah.
Or go through something you got's really good and then come back to it again on that time. That it can make a difference.
That's what makes this deal so interesting, and what keeps us all interested in bass fishing is there's really no absolutes. There's really is no absolutes. We talk about moon phase for spawning cycles, and I did a really in-depth video that we referred to last week where I really broke down the moon phase and kind of, when I had the Elite Series guys here during spawn, I kind of analyze it, and got pretty specific with it. But here's the thing. That moon phase deal is real, and that's the pattern they want to follow. But cold fronts, warm fronts can push them earlier. Cold fronts can delay them. Cold fronts a wave can come in and a cold front hit and back them all out. You know what I mean? Like So different things can happen that can change those effects, and there's so many variables to this, as you said, that there is no absolutes. There's just no absolutes in bass fishing. The one thing I know for sure after 10 years of guiding is I don't.
That's it. And it's, you know what, I was just talking in depth with somebody biologically wise. And, you know, these fish, you can ask the biologist, generation to generation passing on, they can and do past characteristics of survival skills. Right. And if the fishermen in heavy fisheries, they realize that the babies of all the mothers, you know, the babies are a little bit smarter than the mothers were. And then the next generation, they get smart. Think about how smart the generation of fishing become on fork after 40 years of being hammered. And that is never put into perspective. They're not really smart. Their brain is the size of a pinky. Yeah. But their survival skills become amazing. Yeah. Their instincts. Yeah. And that's part of what we got on fork. That's why, you know, distance, quiet noise, you know, the better presentations make all the difference in the world. It really does.
Well, yeah, we like to have viewer involvement here. We got a pretty good question early, so I want to ask you this, and then I want to get into kind of what's been going on the lake this week and what we got coming up ahead of us. This is just a good question. How many times would you return to a spot throughout the day to figure out the timing?
There is some key elements to that. Number one, I would have to say, you know, when I look at a spot or I have a key area, is the food there. So, for example, if we want to talk about a shell bed, maybe I'll go through and graph a shell bed.
Variables, right? There's always variables.
There's always variables, and you know, and those fish, the food may be there. If the food's there, I'm going to come back multiple times. You know, let me give you an example, and I'll use a name to help it. And you know what, just quickly, I want to elaborate. In this same I'm going to answer two questions at once. Talk about shell beds a little bit that I didn't get last week. Heartbreak Ridge. Everybody knows about Heartbreak Ridge. You should. It's a massive superstructure. It's probably 500 yards long. It's very influential on fish movements from offshore, inshore. And you don't have to fish the shell beds that are on the specific areas of it to catch fish. The shell beds that are there are the juice. They're the spot within the spot, if that makes any sense. And
when it really goes down, that's where it goes down. Yeah,
that's where really, and that's the heart of it. It's like a basketball court. So they may be on the whole basketball court, but you want that free throw where the heart of where the dance dances. Right. So you get more bites, bigger bites. And so if I go, now I know my shell, if I graph over those and I see bait in that thing, man, at some point something's going to come there. Remember, I've talked before that if the bait's round, it's safe. If it gets beat up, elongated, or broken into pieces, then something has been hitting it. And so, you know, I wanted to mention this. When Billy and I filmed, I don't remember when it was, and I first took him to that shell bed. We had a contest, his shallow water, my deep water. And when we drove over, remember, Billy, we both looked at each other and went, oh my gosh, look at those fish. And we knew we were going to kill them. We turned the boat around, drug uphill in about 14 feet of water in that shell, and we hammered them. And some big ones too. And that was on camera. Well, the elements here now, again, we're talking mostly to answer your question about, you know, what would keep me coming back to a spot. Food, and it's got to be food there. And if the wind is consistently blowing, you know, elements that tell me this can and have, you know, it's going to happen here. But remember, even with the shell, the lake dropped 8 feet. The last 2 years, in 2021, the lake dropped 8 feet. The last 2 years, I have not done very well on Heartbreak Ridge. In fact, last year, I think I only caught 2 fish. And I've recognized in the pulling of the baits and the jigs that there are less shell there. And so when the lake was down 9 feet, those relocated. They do relocate. And not to get into the shell again, but always, there's an element. Well, there's an element to everything.
The lake changes.
And so, like, let me go a little more step lower. Last week, when we were the last warm turn we had in my pond, bass pulled up on the banks. You could walk around my pond and see 3 to 6 pound bass right on the bank sunbathing. They were sideways to the sun. They weren't pointing at the banks or pointing out like they were looking for females. They hadn't dug nests, but they were sunbathing. The very next day was just the same beautiful sun and nice day. And I walked the pond. There wasn't a single fish on that bank. And I went, what's going on? And then it clicked. Bluebird, high pressure, clear skies. Yeah. So they were backed out. They were backed out just a little bit. And again, it's all, I mean, the smallest elements is what makes a difference in an MLF angler who can put those together. They quack, you know, I mean, just bam, 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 and make decisions. But those are ones that you have to put in. If there's food there, you're going to see me visit that thing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I may want to visit food again that the bait's broken up or wind is pushing on it. Maybe I had a shell bit that had some rounded bait on it at 8 a.m. We fished it, but I knew in the afternoon that wind kicked up and it's pushing it up on the road. Man, hey, that's where I'm going to be. Yeah. So it's good question. A lot of variation to that.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's a deal also of what else do you have? Like, you know what I mean? Like, well, for me and you, or for anybody that fishes fork as much as me and you do, we've got a lot of options. That's the reality. So we may not check it as much as, like, if a weekend angler has a sweet spot, like a real sweet spot, he may go back to that half a dozen times in a day. And that's okay. And that's not the wrong thing. It's another variable is what else do you have to go to? How much stuff do you have to run? How much stuff
is a great
or close to as good as that? And so for a guy like me and you, we're probably only going to hit it. I rarely hit something more than twice a day just because I have so much other stuff to go to. If something's really good and doesn't go off the first time, I'll come back to it a second time. But other than that, I'm not going back multiple times a day because I'm going to be there tomorrow and go to it. You know what I mean? So it's
right. We're guides. Yeah. This is an excellent question, by the way, to you, sir, that threw this out. I mean, we could make almost a 20-minute conversation out of this. Yeah, this also has to do the time of year. For example, in summer, when I'm running deeper stuff, points, structure, I'm going to tell you I have the 20-minute rule. We pull up on a spot. If we're not bit in 20 minutes, we're out. We're going to run and gun. And if we get bit in the 18th minute, that bought us 20 more minutes. So again, and that, I could keep going on this subject. Early spring, this time of year, I may not even move at all. If I know we just got fronted, okay? So here, check this out. We had fish come in with the moon phase warm trend. They got hammered with cold floods. They probably pulled back some. We got the next moon coming, so more fish should be coming. You haven't had spawn yet. There's fish coming. The best thing you can do the next 10 days probably is sit somewhere where fish come to you. If you can strategically have that boat in the right place and grind it out, and you've chose the right spot, these fish coming to you. When they come to you, you're going to catch them. It's a no-brainer.
You said that, and I'm going to tell a little bit of a fail story about that with what's been going on this week because I've been trying to do some of that this week, and it has bit me in the butt a little bit. So we're going to talk about that. But right now, we got another guest ready to come in. None other.
Yeah.
Big money, Dave.
What's up, you two degenerates?
There it goes, man. If we're bowling, I already give you all my money.
I'm in the degenerate class now. What's up, you two monsters?
Yeah. Run around with the outlaws. That's
we're fishing, so I feel like we're fishing. I feel like I stand a chance, but otherwise, we just got a champion that joined our show.
Oh, that's in the past. We talk about the future, which is sacking them, which is stacking them, which I did today and I did yesterday. I had 2 good days the last 2 days. We had 34 yesterday and 25 today.
Nice. It's coming.
Yep. Good. Now be quiet for a minute. Let me tell everybody. Be quiet for a minute. Let me tell everybody how bad I sucked, and I'll let you tell them how to actually catch them. So I got to be honest. I've spent my last 3 days, really. Well, Monday was fine, but yesterday and today were like I'm spun. Like I'm chasing my tail, spinning out. Like I can't get it figured. And I'm with the water trending warm. We always talk about it's more the trend than the temperature. The shallow water is definitely warmer than the middle of the cove and the mouth of the cove. And so there's definitely a warm trend happening where you can see the difference in temperatures the further back in the areas you go. So I'm getting back there, man, and I'm doing what you do. Like I'm doing all the stuff that we know to do, the weightless plastics, fluke Senkos. I'm doing the wacky worms. I'm doing the swim baits and chatter baits and, throwing a top water once in a while if I see surface activity, and then I'm also like backing out a little bit, trying to look, and scope around a little bit. And I can tell you like the main lake stuff or the very mouth, it's got nothing. Like I can tell you with my live scope, there ain't nothing out there. Like it's on the bank for the most part, right in front of it from what I'm seeing. And then, but man, we're just struggling to catch them. Like the bite's been extremely tough for me. And I don't know if I've just had, we get those bad luck days sometimes and you're doing the right thing. You're around them. You just don't catch them. Or I don't know if I'm in the wrong areas, which I don't think I'm in the wrong areas because I know those areas are not the wrong areas. Like they got them in there. So I'm kind of, honestly, I'm a little bit like, I'm about as lost and spun out as I get this week. So David, since you're catching 8,000 fish a day, please tell me how to do that.
If you got $20 on you, I may have to get in your pocket before I tell you. Yesterday we had 34, and 10 of them were over 4 pounds, and only a 5.
If you don't mind, was that fork or was that somewhere else?
Pork. Both days, I ain't fishing anywhere else but pork right now.
Nice, awesome.
And so, yeah. And then today, I took the Fishing Magician out, and I went to that spot where we caught 23 in one spot yesterday, and there was a boat, a Vexus boat in there in the area yesterday for the last 2 days in that area, and he was setting exactly on the spot today when I got there. So, and catching them. So we leave and we go to another spot, and we hit some other spots, and then I run to one more, and there's a guide setting exactly on that spot. And I thought, boy. So we just, kicked back, and I told him, I said, okay, we're just going to run the wind. And so we played the wind game today and ended up trailing into a pocket that had 63-degree water temp. And we threw a swim bait in there, and we caught, 20. I think we caught 22 or 23 in that one pocket just in about the last hour and a half.
How are you catching them?
We left them biting.
How are you catching them?
Those were all on a swim bait. And then I caught
your skinny dipper deal?
Yep. So
are you catching them up in the dirt, or are we in some
dipper? Well, here's the interesting thing. Yeah, they were in 2-3 foot of water, but yesterday I had the clients. I had 2 great clients yesterday, and I've been throwing red rattle traps, and so we've been covering an astronomical amount of water, and actually we're using a 1/4 ounce rattle trap. And so this guy picks up. I had him throwing a Texas rig baby brush hog, and he picks up this 1/4 ounce red trap that I had rigged, and he slings it up there into like 6 inches of water. He makes 3 cranks on it, and he catches one. And I thought, how about that? So I reached down, I grabbed my Senko, and I threw it up there, and 5 foot from him, and that thing hit the water. All those fish were on the inside. There's places where there's grass. Every one of those fish were on the inside grass line, and we went to train wrecking them. And then
I'm literally doing the exact same thing you're doing and not catching them. And then not catching them, bro.
I got another spot where
there's not to interrupt, but Billy, did you find the 63-degree water? Because that's the one thing I heard that
it wasn't that warm yesterday.
And Bill and David, you said that was at the end of the day today, so it took today to get to that warm temp.
Well, yesterday I had 59.5.
Yeah,
was the warmest yesterday. Today, this one pocket had 63 in it.
I had the 58 and 59. I've seen 60, 61 a couple times today. I had the 58 and 59 yesterday. So, I'm in the same temperature areas. I don't know, man. I don't know what's, that's part of this game. Sometimes it just, we've caught fish. Don't get me wrong. We've caught fish, but I'm expecting the results that David's talking about, where we're catching 30 and a half or more or over 4 pounds. That's what I've come to know happens on these warm trends this time of year. And we're going out there grinding away, getting a bite here, a bite there. And I'm just scratching my head going, where are they at? what's going on? So
I think the ones you've been choosing to be on have just been still shocked. We went from 60, 63 back down to 47, bam, we're right back to 60. This has all happened fast, and those fish need some acclimation. Finding that warmer water, even 2 more degrees than everywhere else, is massive.
Some of the harsh reality of what we do for a living is, you're not going to catch them every day. You're just not. And sometimes you do all the right things and you just don't catch them. And you can go look at the professional elite series MLF guys. There's some really good dudes that suck every tournament. Yeah. You know what I mean? Every tournament, there's some dudes that know what they're doing that are on good stuff that don't catch them every single time. So.
I'm glad you just said that. I wouldn't say they suck because there's an amazing road that they took to get to where they are. Yeah. But I do want you guys to think about something, and then we can talk about this in the future. I want anyone watching to take a look at this. Something that I really noticed over the last 6 months, and I've taken the time to really back it up by looking at the results in depth. Watch the fish count. It is not that good. The best of the best are catching the right fish. They go fishing for the right fish. That's the thing. But the count's not that impressive. Some of them are barely fishing the limit. You know, if you look at the bass that where they just fish in St. John, the bottom half, these are the best of the best qualified. The bottom half don't fill limits.
Hey, hold on. Do you think that some of that is because we're essentially somewhat sight fishing year round now with Live Scope? And they're targeting specifically bigger fish? That's got to be some of it, right?
Maybe, and that's why I don't know. I don't even have a thought about it, but I've noticed it, and I've thought, God, is it because our fishing is getting so tough? You know, I mean, sometimes you'll see where they slam. You know, the Jacob Wheeler will slam 28, and the next guy down's 13. But if you look at the fish count, and as good as these guys are, it's kind of like if we were NBA basketball players and they're not making the baskets. And you know, they used to. We used to have a lot more calling out.
Well, I mean, the fish are still there. I mean, for us, the fish are still there. David's reporting, you know, fantastic numbers. So they're there.
We're not using forward-facing sonar either. I never turned it on.
We're so shallow. There's no forward-facing factor at all.
My immediate thoughts are, again, you know, you hit it right in the head. And I tried to say it in the beginning, you know, they're looking for bigger fish, you know. So some of these, you go fish the elites and right now and catch 52 pounders. Well, you've got 10 pounds for your best 5. Yeah. You go fishing for 5 pounders, you only got 2 bites. So you're still beating that guy. So, you know, there's some game into it. But I just noticed still overall, the count seems down. And maybe it is forward. Maybe they're focusing on only those fish. Because like David's proving to us, the count's there. Don't tell me there ain't 4 fish.
Let me throw you a little curveball. Let me throw you a little curveball today that was really interesting. I caught a 7-pounder on a secondary point on a red rattle trap, which we've been throwing a lot of those. And then once we started going looking for wind areas, I'd go into certain pockets. And, man, some of these pockets, the water's really cold. And I kept saying, we just burn gas, keep going. I already told you guys two sessions ago, 3 sessions ago, what I'm doing. I'm looking in north-facing pockets, and I'll go into every single one of them and look at it. And then if it don't match what I'm looking for, then I'm out, go to the next one. Well, yesterday we went into one, and we pulled in there. And the first thing I do is I look to see how clear the water is. If the water you can see down 1.5 feet or 2 foot, that's when we're going to throw the swim bait or a swim jig. But most of the time, the swim bait. And pulled in there, and we started throwing it around. Well, the guys that I had never thrown a swim bait before, and I said, you're going to like this. So they were throwing it. No. We pulled in there. I had them throwing the quarter trap. I was throwing the swim bait, and what do you know? Thump, 5-pounder, boat flipped the 5-pounder. The guy couldn't believe it. And so I ended up catching another one. And so then I gave the guy the rod, and I rigged up the other guy, and so I put the poles down and started having them cold because they'd never caught one on a swim bait. So we ended up catching 5, I think, all good, solid slot fish, and 5 something was the biggest one, and every one of them had a big belly on it. All right, fine.
Yeah, the fish are fat.
Today we go into the same exact spot. All right, Mark and I pulled in there, and I put the poles down at the very mouth of the place, and we started throwing that swim bait around. Dude, there was 2 million 2-pound unders in there. In that pocket. All right. I'm thinking, well, hell, we're going to catch a 6-pounder here in a minute. And I mean, we're just boom. I mean, there was so many of them just boom, 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 and never caught a slot fish. Now, my question to you is, if those males pulled into that pocket and they're pairing up and to start the business in a 63-degree pocket, they're not going to feed once they start the spawning process. Is that the reason why we didn't catch a female in there?
Well, I will tell you this, 2 days till the new moon. So they're going to feed the next day or 2, and then they're probably going to bid.
Right.
Yeah, they're probably going to pay. They're probably going to start to pair up here in a couple of days, and then in about 4 or 5 days, there'll be some pairs in there. Yeah.
Well, I just thought it was so unusual to stab that many solid, big-bellied. I'm talking these things looked like they had eaten 4 million shad.
Well, every fish we've caught lately has been so fat,
gorged on shad kill. We have frozen cold. When we go below 49 degrees, there's shad kill. Remember, everything was bottom locked.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's the last. So now you're talking for the last 3 weeks. That's what's happened. This wasn't just a 2-day deal. We had a really cold spell, warm trend, then a hard cold spell, then some flooding and cold. Yeah. We just had 72 hours or below freezing. So you've had shad kill. Those bass are gorging that stuff.
Well, I saw
my theory on what you said was it was simply I've seen it be so amazing. It was just a warm pocket and everything was probably in there. There was brim in there. There was probably shad in there that was blowing in there. And they were just saying, hell yeah, man, that's freezing. There's a jacuzzi to jump in. I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And that you had, each day you're going to have some different fish come in there. The ones the day before gorged out, whatever. I've seen it in Long Branch, and I've seen it in Little Caney. And my testimony there was I found 49-degree water, Main Lake, found a 20-degree swing, almost 21-degree swing in the back of Long Branch a few years ago. And when we got in that warm water, just that little bit of difference, all the Long Branch didn't have fish. It's like 50s, 50s, 50s. We got back and it got above 60. That was a key, 60 and above. Man, we were smashing. It was like Billy talked about, like magical early fall fishing. Holy crap. My client went back with minnows for crappie and caught 8 and 9 pound bass, and it was crazy. Well, here's my testimony. I got home and messaged Johnny Geitz, good friend of mine, good friend of ours. He said, I told him my story. I said, you need to get out there. He said, no, you need to go to Little Caney. So what do you mean? He said the back of Little Caney warmed up 22 degrees. It was 1 degree warmer than what you had, bigger, more water than the back of Long Branch. And we hammered 70-something bass back there. Light line, he does it a lot like David, spinning rods. I think that's very effective for that shallow water. He hammered them. Well, here's my part of the lesson. I'm like, all right, this was all on a Friday or maybe a Saturday. I thought Monday, that's what I'm going to do. I'm taking my client back to Little Caney's, even better. Well, I'll be dang if Sunday wasn't a massive cold front, knocked it all the way from 70, 71 back down to 22 degrees to 49, and those fish were gone. They were back out in the creeks like we've all discussed before. They backed out to the immediate closest deep water ditches and everything. But then when they came back, they were stung. And it was almost like what you're seeing now. We just had this cold spell 2 days. I bet tomorrow is even better. Thursday, Friday. This thing's going to fire. There's a moon. There's no doubt Billy's right there. Some of these fish will go that fast. 3 days.
Here's the interesting part about it. Mark wants to go again tomorrow. And the thing is that the wind blows out of the north tomorrow at a pretty crisp. All right. So these north-facing pockets that I'm fishing, I've always seen it for the last 5-7 years. It'll blow that warm water out of those pockets, and that temperature in that pocket, those pockets will be a minimum of 5 to 8 degrees colder tomorrow if we've had any kind of 15, 20 mile an hour winds blowing the opposite direction. Now let me finish. So here's an interesting. I told him this too. I said this happened last week, and I was busting them in the same area. And when this happened, I went to that spot, and sure enough, it was colder. And I looked over to the other side of the cove, and I thought, I went over to the other side. The water was warmer by 4 or 5 degrees on the other side. It blew that warm water to the opposite side, and we started throwing those traps.
So I learned that last year. Last year, I was doing just what you're doing. All the south stuff, get blown south, warm water goes in, cool water gets blown out. And I got caught up in a period where there was none of that happening. I wasn't catching any fish. And my buddy called me up. He said, man, you got to go down to Grimes. Well, and here's the part of it. We were having warm trends just like we will tomorrow. We can still warm trend with a north wind this time of year. We're that cold. We still have a warm trend, even though it's a north wind. And so I said, Grimes, what the heck? Then that's north blown. And then I clicked and went, wait a minute. We've had 2 days of north wind blowing. It's uncommon, but it can happen. And so I go down to Grimes, and I'll be dead gum if that north wind hadn't filled Grimes with warm water. So, man, David, you brought on a really good lesson for everybody to pay close attention to. The reason you're smashing fish is you're working your butt off and looking for that one little spot in the whole lake that's like a heating blanket area. Home run, dude. You've got my respect.
All right, David, got a guy coming to Fort for the first time tomorrow. He's asking about swim baits, weedless or exposed hook. I know we're all throwing a swim bait weedless out here.
Weedless, absolutely.
We're fishing it so shallow. We're fishing it in flooded junk and bushes and grasses, and I mean, it's just you got to have it weedless for sure. So. Definitely.
So right now, definitely for me, same thing. If I'm in the many of that backwater, it's weedless 100%. You're not going to get away without it. But if you are working some of those pre-feeding grounds like red clay points, secondary points, shell beds and things, which I wouldn't right now this weekend, but the next rolling of the phase of moon and stuff, we're going to have the line through swim bait. that line through swim bait with the treble hook hanging. You got to throw that on the right spot, the right stuff, usually hard bottom areas and cleaner stuff. You won't throw that thing in the grass. You just won't. It's not like a rattle trap. You're not going to snap it out. Well, you can't. Yeah. If you're as big as Billy, and I've seen Billy rip the lips off a 10-pound bass.
I'm gonna tell you who got me throwing a line through around some grass a little bit, but the grass has to be set up correctly.
Yeah.
But with Heath Taylor throws that line through around grass. Heath is the best swim bait fisherman I've ever seen. Like
you're working. You got to really be focused and working. You can't just be,
When he puts that swim bait in his hand, he is a little bit of a magician, dude. He's really good. David, I want to dig in a little bit to what you've been doing because you're talking about, North Pockets, this and that. So give me some idea on the type of area. Are we talking about any main lake, small pocket? Are we talking about go in a creek arm, get towards the back half of it, and then find the north corners? What? Give me some kind
all
of
the above. All the above.
Just anything that opens, anything that has the north bank, the south link.
Here's what happens. You get sunshine. We got sunshine for 3 days. Anytime that you get the sunshine, I'll give you an example. I got 2 Humminbird graphs, one in front, one in the back. And the readings, the trolling motor sets down deeper in the water. All right. And some of these places where the transducer sets up higher, there was a 3 or a 4 degree difference between the 2 readings on the graph, just for the fact that the top layer of the water is insanely warm. Now you take that wave action, pushing that top layer into those pockets in whichever direction. And here's the strange thing about what happened today is that wind was blowing and we were catching these things one after another. It was blowing right into that pocket. All of a sudden, after a while, the bite slowed down. And I told Mark, I said, this is strange, and I mean, all of a sudden, and I get to looking and I'm watching, and now the wind's, there's the sun. I said, damn, look at this. This wind's rolled around to the west. Now it's over to the northwest. And I said, there's a front coming through right now, and the wind changed, and those fish stopped biting when that wind swung around, and now it was no longer blowing in that pocket.
So for the guy that has a hard time digesting the 30 minutes of conversation we've just had on this, follow the wind, go into pockets, wind-blown pockets. And,
at this time of the year.
And I'm talking about for right now, for the next few days.
Right now. This is a right now deal.
For this weekend, follow the wind, wind-blown pockets, wind-blown corners, and throw a small weedless swim bait, a lipless crankbait, a quarter-ounce lipless crankbait, and a Senko.
That's exactly what I'm using.
I'm going to add a few. I'm going to tweak on it just more. Have more flavor. Make sure it's not a creek that has water like a natural spring. Groundwater coming in there can completely kill you. You think you got the perfect one, and it's too steep, too deep, has groundwater coming, and it's still too cool. Watch those. They need to have that flatted kind of back where things can warm up. They need the vegetation. Really important.
Do that for you, David. The flatter the pocket, the better. Anything like that?
Well, some of these pockets that I'm in have actually got emerging coontail growing in it. And anytime you can find 2 foot of water, 2.5 foot of water with a little bit of coontail sticking up, it's game on. And
what I'm asking here is in general, though, like a steep bank pocket versus a flat bank pocket. The flatter one's better.
I've got some places where my boat was setting in 8 foot. And I'm throwing to the bank that's got some vegetation on the bank. Right. And we're throwing traps up there on those banks. And then whenever I get the flatted stuff, like in the back where it flats out, and you got the little small in the back of a pocket where you got the coontail sticking up a little bit out in 2-3 foot of water, that's when we're throwing the swim jig, the swim bait, and the quarter-ounce trap there. I'll have a half-ounce trap tied on for the steep stuff, and then a quarter-ounce trap tied on for the flatter stuff. And then if the traps keep hanging up, if there's junk down there, then that's when we throw the swim bait. But I have to have the clearer water for the swim bait.
Is the flat water, the flatter water, is that better than the steeper water? Or are they both good or what?
It depends on time of day, because these fish are acting a lot like here. It's been this way even before this cold front came in, because I was sitting in the back of a pocket. Let me see, the 2 days before that major cold front came through, and we were throwing those swim baits, and we were catching them on every cast, literally every cast. And I mean, it was in the last hour of the day. They acted like summer fish at the end of the day. And we went in that same place today, and yesterday and did not get a bite in that pocket, in that same exact pocket. And I said, and the water temp in there was 60 degrees. And I thought, well, this is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. Why would not these fish bite in here when a week ago, 9 days ago, they were absolutely just stacked in here? And so you just got to keep moving.
Yeah.
I mean, my gas bill sucks.
Yeah.
It's a good write-off. It's a good tax write-off.
On the swim baits, the size of the swim baits, 4 to 5 inches this time of year is what I would say.
Well, here's the strange thing. Normally, and I try to put people on unders for tournaments, and we do pretty good at that. Normally, we throw Reaction Innovation Skinny Dipper in the 3.5 inch size,
the little dipper,
the small one. But the strange thing, that day that we were in that pocket and they were throwing the 3.5, I put on the 5 because I was looking for a bigger bite. Well, you know what? We kept catching the same 2 and 3 pounders, even on the big one and the little one. And
I think this time of year, pre-spawn, I think the shad or whatever life cycle the shad in or whatever, for me, like that fall deal, I catch them a lot better in the fall, early fall on that 3.5. And then in this time of year, in springtime, and this time of year through springtime, I catch them a lot better on the 4 to 5 inch size swim baits.
We're throwing the 5 inch now. We threw the 5 inch all day, and we did not have a problem getting. And the reason why I like to throw the 5 inch one, it's unique in what it does, is the fact that you've got the chance to latch on to a 5, 6, 7, 8 pounder with the bigger bait, and it just keeps us away from all those.
Some guys out there. Some guys are out there going, to hell with that. I'm going to go grab me one of these 7 inch, whatever, big weedless baits. Mike knows what I'm talking about.
Well,
you know what else? And you know what else? You know what else I learned this on Welsh on Thanksgiving Day about 4 years ago when I was catching 2 5-pounders at the same time. But that same water that David's fishing right now with those exact same, whatever he's throwing. This is the Reaction Innovation Little Dipper right here. This is the 3 inch. Yeah. Whatever color he's throwing, you go in there with a weedless Alabama rig, and you probably clean them up the same too, maybe even more, maybe bigger fish.
I haven't thrown that in there. I mean,
now your vegetation, these are weedless, and it does go through vegetation really good.
I know.
But
I got 2 of them tied on. Yeah, but I didn't throw.
It's pre-spawn. It's something about that thing and pre-spawn fish. It just, I don't know why. I call it a spinner bait on steroids. If you're catching them on spinner bait, this thing is spinner bait on steroids.
Yeah, but also too, I haven't thrown the spinner bait. I can't get the bites as good on a chatterbait, but I watch guys today throwing spinner baits and catching them on a spinner bait.
Spinner bait catching, yeah.
This is the rig with 3 inchers, and then this is the big rig 5.
Yeah.
So on the A rig, if you want to throw it up shallow, you can. You got to put here's the key. You got to put weightless, completely weightless, like a 3/4 quad EWG hook, no belly weight on the hook whatsoever. And here's why the Reaction Innovations Skinny Dipper is so important in that scenario, or the Little Dipper. If you're on A rig, I would recommend the 3.5 inch, the Little Dipper. But the reason why the Skinny Dipper is so important is because the Skinny Dipper is like the only swim bait that's that small that you can run with 0 weight and it doesn't flip on you. When you know what I mean? Like when you're swimming it flips over. Like you run another weedless swim bait on there, and that sucker's going to flip on its side if you don't have a belly weight on it. With the Reaction Innovation Skinny Dipper, Little Dipper, it'll actually run pretty much true 99% of the time with no weight whatsoever. So you can rig an Alabama rig really light. It's got a lot of drag, so it lifts in the water, and you can fish it really shallow like that. But the Reaction Innovations is the one you want to use if you're doing that for sure.
Heavy line, like and you don't need a braid. You want like a 30-pound big game that really bulky and it floats. And you keep that rod tip at a 10, 12 o'clock position. You can have that thing riffing right at the surface of the water. And basically, I've done it sometimes where every now and then a bait will flick out of the water. And it's right at the surface. You can see it. And then, I mean, I'll get 6 inches, 12 inches of water with it. If it's just right, oh, my God, the bites are vicious.
The bigger the line, the higher in the water that the A-rig will ride, the bigger the line.
And what I've done is I use the Owner twist locks. They're really easy to use. These are really light. I believe it do have a 1/8 on this because I was using this at Lake Welsh in the shoots of the grass on fork. Yeah, it has to be really, if you're going to fish that shallow, you got to have no weights, period. And one thing I like about Reaction Innovation, I bet David, I know he fishes it a lot to back this up, It's one of the only swim baits that'll still swim really true, but it still has that rock.
It'll roll. It'll roll.
It's something about that cracking little rock back and forth that makes them bite it. David's smiling. So I knew the owner in the beginning when they made all the packages. They had mothers and parents went flipping out because the packages were silhouettes of naked women.
Hey, the dude's the biggest pervert in the history of bass fishing.
Oh, yeah, I'm not even going to talk about it. I mean, and he's the one, Andre, I will say his name, Andre. He's the one that did the Reaction Innovation, that took the Reaction, or the Vixen, which really is a Hankler bait. They gave him the rights to it, and then they took it away from him for a while, gave it back to him, I guess, whatever. But his baits are badass. I mean, he had a contest on the West Coast for a new color that they made. If you guessed the colors, if they chose your color that you put in, you won a $300 package. And somebody had put this purple crusher looking color in, and they nicknamed it Statutory Grape.
Oh my God. Everything's an innuendo with Reaction Innovations, like all their color names. They've got the trucker girls on the packaging. It's crazy.
White trash is, their white color. They did remove the girls. This is the newest packaging, but I can go grab you some packaging. I can grab you some packaging that still, the original packaging that has boobies. It literally has boobies. Parents went nuts. Yep.
Also, you got to take in consideration the day and the conditions, and like yesterday's a prime example. Y'all probably on the water yesterday. You noticed that the wind was very, very, very light.
No wind yesterday.
And no wind. And so when we pulled into some of these areas, I said, you might as well not even pick up that moving bait. They ain't gonna hit it. They're just wasting time. And so I had them rigged up with a baby brush hog. And while they were doing that, then I'm thinking, I'm going to throw a Senko. So I had a Senko on there, and I use a real light weight on it when there's no wind. And so we're throwing it up there, and it ended up about 30 minutes later, I had to put them Senkos on because that stick bait was getting way more bites than the baby brush hog was.
You know what else is getting bit in that deal when they're like that? And I would love to see you throw this in your area, is that, everybody now calls it a Nico rig, but kind of what I've always thought of as a wacky worm is a trick worm style worm with a half nail weight in the head and the wacky hook, and that's been getting, like, that's been our best bite getter in my boat the last couple of days when we've grinded. I would love to see what that would have done on the calm day yesterday in the areas you were whacking them in, David. I bet it would have caught them good.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it would.
Yeah.
Because when you rig it, Nico, are you taking the hook and sticking it back in the plastic to make it weedless?
No. So I use a Gamakatsu finesse wide gap weedless hook. It's got a little plastic ball on it.
It's got a weed guard.
Huh?
Yeah, it's got a weed guard on it.
Yeah, it's got a plastic weed guard that kind of tags itself on the barb. I know you don't like that as much, but I do. That's the one I've used for a long time.
Here's what I'll do a lot of times too, is that I do it several different ways. I just shot a video that I turned in about the crossover rig that I use on my wacky worms, and it's a deal that it's a little rubber band thing that you pinch it open, you put the wacky worm in there, and it's on the top of it. It's got a little bump, and what they did was they got holes going this way and this way, so you can make your hook perpendicular to the bait or parallel. When I'm fishing wooded areas where there's stumps, I'll put the hook facing directly towards the front of the worm. I'll hang up nearly as much. When I'm fishing grass, like a Sam Rayburn or something like that, I'll put it perpendicular, and my hook, I have basically 100% hook ratio whenever I do it like that, but if I'm fishing in a situation where I've got coontail grass or some kind of sloppy grass or whatever, I'll put the O-ring, I'll run the hook underneath the O-ring, turn it back up, and then peg it, put the tip of the hook into the plastic where the weight is, and it destroys your worms a lot quicker, but you make it totally weedless to work the wacky worm in the junk.
Wow. Impressive. I was going to talk about the way you just talked about rigging it weedless, but the other deal, man, that sounds so awesome. You got to show me that. I use
the crossover a lot. That is fantastic. I got the Tackle Warehouse, and I constantly use it. I got to order. Matter of fact, I got to order more of the little rubber deals.
I've just never had I've never had any
issues. Guy. You got to be 12-inch weight on all the time.
Hey, I throw a wacky worm a lot more than you think I do, buddy. A lot more than you think I do. But that hook that I use has just kind of solved all that for me. Like it's just that weed guard on that hook. I don't have any real issues with snagging up in grass, and I don't have any wood issues. It just kind of that weed guard on that hook works great.
I will tell you.
I do what Billy does. I do what Billy does because I actually learned it from Billy here in these parts, and I wasn't a shallow water fisherman that much.
Finesse. Let's go.
Yeah. And so I like it. It does work, but I really like what David just said. I think being able to turn that hook and stuff, that is cool. It's
a great rig.
That's critical.
Also too for your clients out there, people out.
Exactly. I got clients that'll drag into a tree. If you do too, they'll scream giant fish. It's a shark. It's a catfish, and you're telling them it's a stump, and no, it's not.
But if you got that 60-degree water, all right, and some of these in these pockets, and a prime example to this is Long Branch. I mean, it's got steep banks in there. It's got some vegetation on the banks, and this is the perfect place to throw that wacky worm if it's over 60-degree water, even 58 to 63-degree water. You can rig that wacky worm right now, and just kick back, take your time, go up there, especially on a calm day, and you're going to get a hold of some big slots, if not a giant. So I'll throw it even on 15-pound line is what I normally use this time of the year. I won't use any heavier than that, but it works insanely well.
So we had a question about what brand of Senko are you throwing? I'll tell you the Senko I've been throwing is that crossbait Senko. And it's really good. Like I cannot begin to tell you. Like it actually holds up to multiple fish. So I've been catching them on that, and I've been really happy with the crossbait Senko. David, what brand of stick bait?
Here's what I do. Whenever I'm fishing in I'll give you an example. Let me pick something right out of the air. The back, and you guys can know this place. The back of Alligator, the very very back. Notice how flatted it is, and sometimes there's some vegetation growing in that. I will use a Yamamoto Senko in that weightless with a 5/0 hook because its water may only be 2 to 3 foot deep in there, and so I'll use that bait. Now, if I'm fishing most any other place, if it's got a little bit steeper bank or if the grass is a little bit thicker, that on the outside edge, I will use either a Yum Dinger or something that's cheaper. I mean, I can get those things for half the price of the Yamamotos. And if I'm putting a 1/16 or a 1/8 tungsten on the front of it, it doesn't make any difference. Now, that being said, I did a video on this here about 3 weeks ago, is that I've been using, and this thing is amazing, is the VMC Hole Shot hook. All right. And especially on a fluke, it's the weight on this hole shot hook is towards the back bend is where it's at on that hole shot. It makes a fluke fall more like this instead of nosing down.
That's not the drop dead hook?
Nope. It's called the hole shot. All right.
You know what if you use the drop dead hook, the VMC drop dead hook?
Is drop dead? Now you got me confused. Is it the hole shot or the drop dead?
So it's like an EWG style hook, but there's a screw lock on it, and then there's a little light, like kind of rubber core weight, like but it's like you're talking about back.
But it's all the way to the back.
Or a fluke.
It might be the drop dead. Yeah, I thought it was a whole shot. Drop dead. But anyway, that weight is all the way to the back. And I had, when I first started using this hook 2 years ago, 3 years ago even, I'd had some flukes rigged with it, and I really like it like that. And then I was using a Senko or a Yum Dinger with the 16th weight in the front, and it's back after the lake had come up and there's that vegetation out in 4, 5, and 6 foot of water. Well, on several guide trips, I threw the Yum Dinger or I threw the Senko. I had them throwing the fluke with that in particular hook, and the catch ratio was 5 to 1 consistent.
Yeah.
Consistent.
Dude, that hook is the drop. When I've used the drop dead hook, it makes a huge difference. Like
I learned that from Kelly Jordan
rigging, and you use that drop dead hook, it does have a little weight, so it's no longer weightless.
About 25 years ago, I was fishing with Kelly Jordan. I've been friends with him for a long, long time, and we were out one day on Fork, and he had a hook that was the strangest thing I seen. It was the bend of this long shank hook. It had the weight in the bend. All right. And he showed me, he said, "Oh yeah, watch this." And he flipped that thing over the side, and that fluke went just like this. Yeah. It wobbled going down. Yeah. And we were fishing in 25 foot of water with a regular fluke, and he was catching the absolute crap out of them. Mm-hmm. And so one day I was walking through Lake Fork, and and I happened to, something caught my eye, and I noticed that hook, and it reminded me of Kelly Jordan. Well, since then, I've always done this. I've taken that 5/0 hook, and I've taken a split shot, and I've taken a pair of pliers, and I've clamped the crap out of it right almost where the bend starts, and I can duplicate that same reaction of the fluke.
Man, that is so cool. I said, wow, because you made me recognize something. I used to be a striper guide in amongst bass fishing and fly fishing and when I worked for the hookup. When I would striper guide, we would go out and catch live shad. A lot of times the next day, you'd have dead shad from previous days. We'd use the dead shad for chum. Crystal clear water, 60, 70, 80, 90 foot visibility. When we would throw the dead shad over for chum as they would fall, that's what they would do.
Wobbling. Yeah. So
it would have just this weird kind of a fall. When you said it, I could just see it. I'm like, wow, falling, dying, injured bait. Perfect. I mean,
so now that, we're getting to the point of the water temp now to where I'll start leaning on that fluke rig more so than I will on a Senko for my client.
You have to be around shad when you do that. Now we got spawning fish. It doesn't matter. Just triggers a bite.
Because I'm using brim color, especially in 55, 58.
So you're just triggering a bite. You're triggering a bite with that fall.
I'm using a brim colored fluke anyway. And so it's just a matter, and this especially, you can't do it like today because the wind was absolutely smoking, earlier today. And so it was harder. It would have been harder to do it in those kind of conditions. But the lower wind days are the tougher conditions in general. And that's where these things really shine and bail you out.
Yeah. So we have a question here about what are our thoughts on a wake bait. I'll start and just say that I think a wake bait is fantastic. They're fantastic, but in very narrow niche windows. The water's got to be set up right. The grass, if you got grassy lake, then the grass has to be set up just right for it. So it's just kind of like a narrow niche window for wake baits, but when they're on them, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
Same. I was searching for wake baits that you saw me leaving, was kind of digging in the closest cabinets. I thought I had them close by, but I don't. A lot of wake bait fishing in California. I think Billy just hit it right on the head. It's kind of like frog fishing. You know how like frogs, it's like a hero or zero. One day they're all over it, and then they don't touch it for a week for whatever reason. They're still there, but they just won't eat it. I think today, like Fork and things, most of the year is going to set up better for a glide bait, which is a segment bait, and it's underwater just by 8, 10, 12 inches or so. Wake baits, most wake baits are kind of just what they're called. They're waking at the surface, and for the fish to commit to the surface, you got to have everything right.
It's kind of like one of the deals, like you got to have it in your boat, and you're probably going to use it a few times a year, or you're only going to catch them on it a few times a year. And some years, maybe not even that. But like when you catch them on it, you're going to dust them all. Like you're going to bust them. Yeah,
but he may be talking about too the little small wake baits, the hard baits, also.
Good point.
With like the man's -1. I think that could be what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Well, I'm not talking about the jointed wake baits. I'm talking about and I think that's what this guy. I'm assuming that's what he's talking about.
The little tiny ones that looks like a crankbait.
It's a square bill, but it's a wake bait. Yeah.
Honestly, to be honest, the Movement 80X is almost a wake bait. If it would stay at the surface, it'd be a wake bait.
Rod tip up, it is.
Yes. Bingo.
And hey. The original, so the Movement 80X is a saltwater knockoff, but it's all a derivative of what David just said and what this viewer commented, the -1. The -1 is still around, and it still works, and it's crazy good. The Movement is an adaptation of a saltwater bait. It's a wake bait or, a 1 foot diver, whatever you want to call it, basically a wake bait. But, they're very good. They're very, very good. You just don't get to use. They're not effective all the time. And the water column, wherever you're fishing, has to be set up right. You got to be in shallow water where there's not too much cover where you can't fish it, not too much grass because there's too much grass, it'll just bog up. You can't fish it. So everything's got to
really good around wood. Really good around the wood.
Brad said -1 was deadly in Fork in the 90s because there was hydrilla.
Yeah.
You have to have grass.
Everything was deadly in the 90s. Everything was deadly in the 90s. Lance Vick said to me one time, he said, man, back in the 90s, he said, we'd all come in at lunch and everybody had fish up to 8 pounds, 40 of them. Every guy, that was common. 6 to 8 pounders are common. Yep. And you talk about who caught the 10 pounders, because there were 10 pounders caught every day back then. And he said, I'm going somewhere real amazing. But Lance Vick said at Mark Pack's Rip RP, my buddy, but at his funeral, Lance said, we'd all come in there at lunch, be talking about how good we did. And we had 43 over 6 pounds and 2 8-pounders, a 9-pounder and a 10-pounder. And then we'd hear that Mark Pack had 2 11s, a 12 and 13, hydrilla. The difference back then, if you could blindfold one of us or blindfold anybody and just go out there and say, stop, and start tie to a tree and start fishing, and you were going to catch bass.
I grew up punching grass at Rayburn.
So
and this lake here, we every day punching that grass. If you didn't have at least 35 pounds for your 5 biggest fish, you had a bad day when flipping grass here. It was such a depressing thing to see the grass leave that many years ago.
So
I missed it.
We hear these stories about how great Lake Fork, and it was great. There's no doubt about it. What goes unnoticed is, look, man, so they took them all off now. But you used to be able to go watch all the old Honey Hole Outdoors episodes on YouTube, right? And you could go watch you could go find old Lake Fork episodes from the 90s, the heyday. They didn't just do it like that every day. It wasn't. There's a little bit of exaggeration and revisionist history. There was
fishing, buddy.
Fork and we're like, what the hell? I couldn't catch it. It's tough. There was tough days then too. You know what I mean? It's.
Sure, there was.
It just.
Fishing,
I don't know because I wasn't here, but I know it. You remember the highlight reels. Even if we're looking back, Mike, 7, 8 years ago, and we're thinking about how good this year was or that year was. You're remembering the highlight reels, but dude, you had tough days in that year too. You know what I mean?
Sure, we did. Always. Great point, Billy. Way to be. What's the word? The humility, or I don't know that. There's a word I'm looking for to be able to. Not a pessimist. You're not being negative. You're being practical. And sure, there was.
Objective.
Of course, objective. That's it. I'm tired and I got to click out pretty quick here, but that's very great objective. And sure, there was. But I love Heartbreak Ridge. It's got about 5 or 6 shell beds on it. 2 or 3 of them can be really, really rewarding. One of them produces double-digit fish every single year. But from what I've learned, talking to old schoolers, and I mean some of the original guys that got here before, you couldn't even go through Heartbreak Ridge. Heartbreak Ridge. They had to trench it out at that buoy originally as the lake was coming up. And at that time, there was a wall of hydrilla that was the same distance as Heartbreak Ridge, which is a good, I'm going to guess 300 to 500 yards, Billy. It's got to be. And the wall went out to 20 feet is what I was told. It was like an explosion of hydrilla. And they named it. They named it Heartbreak Ridge because there would be dozens of boats out on that ridge out there smashing 4, 5, 6 pound bass, hundreds of fish caught, and someone would have their heart broke every day out there. It's still good, but man, I would love to see that wall.
I know.
Billy, you took me to Brandy Branch, and we saw plumes of hydrilla that looked like a cloud exploded in the sky all the way out into 20 feet of water.
That's how Fork used to be that way. Rayburn, David, Rayburn Farmers Flats. What I would love to see is get the hydrilla. I want it back on the main lake on Fork. Like Toledo went through a little down spell and it wasn't as good for a while. And then now all of a sudden Toledo has main lake grass in that Housing 6 Mile area. There is main lake grass on Toledo out in that 12, 13 foot water. I want to see Fort get that. If we could get the mouth of Little Caney, if we had inside the mouth of Little Caney, we had hydrilla out to 12 foot of water. How good would it be, guys?
Yes. When I fished it in 2010, when Mark took me here on my first tour here, the golf courses and all that was all lily pads and hydrilla those reefs that I fish now, you couldn't fish top of those reefs. They were all hydrilla. The whole thing was covered.
Not without punching, you couldn't.
Yes, punching, right. They were matted. I remember there was areas and they drove me around. And that was just 14 years ago.
And you talk to biologists and Texas Parks and Wildlife people about it. I'll tell you, Jake's great, our biologist here, and it's like, man, they're not doing anything to restrict the growth of grass. It just isn't as fertile for whatever reason. It's just not taken back. And Toledo didn't have it like that for a while, and then all of a sudden it came back now. I will say this.
Conroe, Conroe does the same thing. They've hammered Conroe, and it comes back, and so we can see some. We won't see the 90s again.
Conroe was a different story because that was a grass carp deal, and when the grass carp that don't reproduce died off, the grass came back. That's what happened to Conroe.
Yeah,
but
true.
Toledo's a different deal because Toledo. The thing about Toledo is the Sabine River flows out of Tawakoni, and Lake Fork Creek flows out of Lake Fork and meets the Sabine right there at Highway 80, and then nothing is in between that and Toledo Bend. So all that water here all flows to Toledo Bend. So my point in saying that is Toledo a more cyclical with grass where it gets it back on the main lake because more nutrients flow down into Toledo because of the big river system? Probably.
But you don't see it.
Are we just never going to get the grass on Fork because we don't have a river system bringing nutrients to us? I don't know.
The closest you're going to see.
But we don't have the cattle farmers. We don't have the cattle farmers anymore. Fertilizer's gone.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the number one thing. But at Toledo Bend, you rarely ever see grass above, let's say, for example, Myrick Point, or let me think of another one that's over there where God dang it, what is the name of that boat ramp up there? Huxley Bay. You almost never see grass above Huxley Bay, and that's where the river flows in. But it doesn't start
right.
San Patricio.
Yeah, no, where it grows on Toledo Bend, where the grass grows on Toledo Bend is like 100 miles from where the river enters.
Exactly.
So maybe I'm completely wrong.
Well, Mike said a key thing, and I mean, back in the day, there were 6 dairies on Lake Fork, and I had an old salt tell me one time. He said that the cows are the reason the grass grows in the nitrogen in the grass, and that runs off into the lake. And so places where there's cows, there's generally going to be grass.
Right. So it makes sense.
Where's the grass right now on Lake Fork? And it's over there where those cows are, up in Olwell Bay area. They got cows all over that area. Up in Creek.
Yeah, you know what? Wow. Everywhere that there's cows. How about in Williams, even where there's the old goat farm? It's still got that principles of that happening, the fertilizer.
That Upper East Side where all those cows are in Olwell Bay and all that, that's where most of the grass grows. Most year, now not necessarily right now. This year, that's not where most of the grass is, but most years, the most and best grass is in the northeast side of the lake.
Oh, no
doubt. I am so impressed, David. So impressed. You made me I'm learning some things right now. Even I've got a pocket that I go into every year, and it's got those silly little Oreo cookie cows, but it doesn't matter. They still farm there. There's a bunch of them, and they're farming cows. And there's grass. There's grass.
They still take a dump, and it gets to run off in the lake.
There's grass in those areas. Very little. It's just enough for what I like. But
to answer Brian's question, I mean, Billy may be going to target the overs. Mike may be going to target the overs. I, as a guide, we go to target bites.
Here's what I want to say about this.
If the over happens to fly on our hook, praise the Lord.
Here's what I want to say about this. This time of year, you don't have to target overs to catch them. They're getting up on the bank with the other ones too. They're getting mixed in. They're up there for that warm water as well. Now, if you had an Elite Series event on here today, there's no doubt about it. The guy who's leading it would be catching 5 on scope in about 8 foot of water, 6, 8 foot of water. So if you want to target just specifically the biggest fish you can, and you got the skills and you got the electronics, the technology in your boat, and you got the ability to use that thing effectively, which is a challenge, by the way. It's a challenge. Like, it's not easy to go use live scope. Then there's no doubt about it. Your best chance to catch a bigger fish is live scoping right in front of these spawning areas, like right out in front of them. It's really similar to what went on in the Elite Series event last year at the end of February, where those guys, Trey McKinney was live scoping in about 6 to 8 foot of water for most of the event and catching fish on a jerk bait and a Senko. They were fixing a spawn, and they were right in front of those areas. That would be how to target a bigger fish. Now, that being said, if you're not a very highly skilled guy, you're probably going zero doing that.
Yeah, but you
my answer, if I may, and then I gotta clear out. But I don't, as a fisherman, I love big fish, target big fish of all species, and I don't fish for overs. That's that's titling a single fish. That doesn't happen that often on Fork. But here's what I do is I fish high percentage big fish patterns. Keyword big fish patterns. A big fish to me is a 5 or 6 pound. Anything above 5 or 6 pound is a big fish. Okay. Those are our Lake Fork specials. When you fish and stick with big fish patterns, you're going to have two things happen. Mark Peck said it best, and I love the way he says it. It is a 50-50. Okay. When you fish big fish patterns, you're either going to hero or zero. Your batter number 4 in the lineup on baseball team, they tell you swing the freaking bat. You're saying, oh, I might strike out. I might strike out. And the team says, no, man, we don't care. If you hit the ball, you knock some bitch out the park. So big fish patterns, yes, you're hero zero. Here's how Mark said it. If you're going to fish big fish patterns 6 days a week, expect this. 2 good days, 2 not so good days, 1 day that you can't do nothing wrong, and 1 day you wish you weren't there. And if you put that in perspective, that's the same thing as saying it's a 50-50.
Yeah,
right.
It's a commitment. It's a commitment. So, I am starting to change how my guide on Fork because the overs are not abundant. We're not coming by bunches of them. And I like David's approach. I've got a lot of clients that just want to catch fish this time of year. Just go fishing, man. You're going to run into some big ones. You're going to be shocked.
For his thought on this is that in the last 3 weeks we've made 5 million casts between myself and clients, and we've only caught 2 fish between 7 and 8 pounds.
But you caught a lot of fish. We caught a lot.
We caught a lot, but we caught some 4s, 5s, and 6s, but we only had 2 in the 7.5 pound range, maybe a little over 7.5, that with all those casts. So to go target an over or to go target a big fish, you just can't do it. I mean, you wait for those, like Mike said, you'll catch the day when those fish are actually moving up. And that's why I posed that question earlier about, man, those big slot fish were in this one pocket. And then today they were all, I might have had a 10 or 11 pound bag of unders today for our
nice. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's big.
But
that's huge. That's
huge.
Huge.
Are those in there looking for those females? Are they pairing up, in 63-degree water? Yet to be seen.
Mike, one more thing before you go, man. We kind of glossed over it last week. We didn't really mention it. And I think it goes to speak a compliment to Lake Fork that we didn't mention this or talk about it a whole bunch. But we're so used to it here at Lake Fork that it's just not that big a deal, I guess. But how special is Lake Fork that every time, damn near every time there's a tournament here, there's a double-digit caught. And there was a 12-pounder caught in the Bass Champs tournament, the stringer tournament. So guys are trying to catch unders to fill their limit out, and somebody caught a 12-pounder. The winning team
12-7-1. 12-7-1, man. That almost beat Sherlocker.
Yeah, almost 13. Right. Yeah, heavy 12.
I wish that thing would have had one more freaking crawfish in its belly because then it would have gone out with a Sherlocker.
Do y'all know what he caught that on?
So
I was told he caught it on Saturday.
That's what I'm saying is like.
Most likely, that's one of the biggest.
Hold on. That didn't even make headline news around here. Just another day. So as much as we talk about Lake Fork being tough and we don't see the overs as much as we used to, buddy, there still ain't no place like this. They're just saying it's special.
Absolutely. They're there. There's really plenty of them. It's just they're hard to catch, man. When you've got a guy, and that's why I said, look at the numbers on the elites, and I'm going to go with this. I got to go with this. But if you can, I don't know if they can show fish counts anymore, but I watched it, moment for moment. And JT or all these guys that were in the top 10, some of them didn't catch but 7 fish a day.
Right.
Okay, but and here's what I said this last year. Do you guys realize that Cooper Gallant got 10th place and he was 2 fish shy? 2 fish shy of a limit? If he could, I guarantee it went to, and he made Century Belt and didn't even finish a limit one day.
Yep.
He had 4 fish one day for 28 pounds. 4 fish. He could have won it if he would have had a couple giants in there. He would have won it. So, but the fish count was low. A lot of reasons targeting big fish. They knew if you didn't have them, you weren't going to win. But that shows they're there. They're there. And I'm tired. I got to get out of here. But man, great time, guys. Thank you for all of you guys, the people watching, and the questions were awesome. David, I'm blown away I knew you were good. I knew you were great. I knew you were great. I didn't realize the depth of how I'm pretty impressed. That's all I got to say. I even learned a few things tonight that'll help me this year. So I won't end up on your spots. I won't end up on your spots, but I bet you I catch a few fish that have your tattoo on them.
Learn this. You talk about in that tournament like that. Of course, Billy's going to be shocked. I did the math on this and all the numbers that those guys caught in the tournament, and they had all those big numbers. It worked out in that tournament that each angler only caught 7 fish a day. That was all.
That's where I was at. See what I'm saying? See what I'm saying?
Every entry for that fish that day, that's what it averages.
Y'all like
how
7
many?
fish a day is bad. I like catching 7 fish a day and catching 25 pounds. I like that.
Sure, we can do it. We're guides, but how many people can go out there knowing I'm going to fish for 8 hours for maybe 7 bites, maybe 7 bites.
Now you know why I go to the places where we can catch 100 sometimes.
Yep. And that's the best of the best, man. That's the best of the best, So, that's it. That's it in a nutshell. I appreciate you guys again. Thank you, everybody. Billy.
Bye.
Probably see you next Wednesday.
Yeah, buddy. Right, let's see you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
But
I think a lot of that, though, I do think that a lot of that is they're targeting individual fish now with live sonar so much, because if you go look at the numbers when they were here in April, when Lee caught 42 pounds, they were catching a lot more numbers of fish. Or the one he won in May when they were fishing offshore, they were catching a lot more numbers of fish. But even in those events, Lake Fork 100% is not the best bite-getting, fish-catching lake. It's not. It's not even
it's not a number. Fork is not a numbers lake in general.
Not a good numbers lake. It's not
a big fish numbers lake. Like I'll give you an example, like Monticello used to be.
Monticello used to be.
Monticello.
Well, it still is. Hey, it still is, Dave.
I know, but I'm almost wanting to bring bolt cutters over there and cut the bolt there, get in the damn ramp. I mean, I'm gonna bet that thing's monster good. But we used to have days where we might have 30 over 5 pounds. I mean, it was insane. Matter of fact, I had another guide boat with me on a day over there one day, and we caught 3 10-pounders that day at Monticello. So what are the odds of that? But anyway, back to that guy's question. If you're going to go target an over, like Billy, what you just said, it's got to be scoping those trees right out in front of spawning spots. Yeah. And McKinney, in the area he was in, he did catch some bigger fish doing that. But, one thing that goes unnoticed is his biggest fish of the tournament came off a boat dock. He caught a 9.5. He caught a 9.5 off that single boat dock in there.
Yeah, and that boat dock is, just textbook where one else.
It's an isolated boat dock.
It's isolated. They spawn on either side of it. They spawn on that corner around it, and
I catch them on both sides of it every year.
Yeah. Yep. I think she's just sitting there staging on that boat dock, waiting to go get on a bed.
But that shows they could be anywhere. And those fish.
Target bigger fish though. That scoping in those type of areas is if you really want to just hone in on. Don't care if you get a lot of bites. You just want to catch bigger ones. Like that is.
That's the way to
do it.
And you got to be exceptionally good at it. And then the number one factor, you got to catch a day where the wind's right, because you're not going to go out in a 20-mile-an-hour wind.
You scope today.
Forget it. You might as well just stay home.
So what's funny is I looked at today, because we weren't catching them up shallow today. Like if we caught a few, we're just grinding along, whatever. And I looked at my customers today and I went, look, I'm going to tell you, because these guys could actually, they could fish good enough that I could have probably went and scoped with them a little bit. And I was like, the thing to do is to go scope, but we can't, because look at that water moving. You can't scope in that, man. It's not going to work.
You got to have the right people if you're going to, on a guide trip, if you're going to scope. And to be honest with you, I've got a lot of Jack Yorks, some other guys, their clients that they went and did that and they didn't like the experience.
Yeah, I think there's customers that love it. I think there's customers that love it, and Jack obviously is successful, does a great job. And there's other guys in the state of Texas that do it too. There's not a lot. There's a few, there's a handful, but it's got to be the right customer. And we all kind of, we've talked about this. We curate our customer base. Like we build a customer base that suits how we fish over time. I saw a guy yesterday, David, a guide, and I don't want to put him on blast or anything because he wasn't doing anything wrong, but he was out there running a live scope in the trees out in front. I was back there fishing the shallow in the grass and getting a couple bites, and he was out there in the trees scoping. And Dave, he had 3 dudes in his boat.
Wow.
And I was like, So
No.
what are these other two guys doing all day? What are they doing? Just waiting their turn back there and talking to each other? I don't know what's going on.
I just count that as sight fishing with electronics.
Mhm.
And even when we're in April, late, say March 15th through the end of April, and I mean, you well know as well as I do that clients, I mean, you got a client working on a 6-pounder or 7-pounder on a bed, and you got the other person back there throwing a wacky worm every direction. And, I mean, that just don't work if they're working on a fish for 2 hours. You just can't do that. I mean,
sight fishing,
it depends on the client.
Sight fishing, it's a little bit different because there's a lot of fish up and around the banks within a cast of it. And so the guy on the back deck can catch some fish while the other guy's sight fishing. And you're sitting in one spot, power pull down, obviously, but he can fan cast around and catch 2 or 3 fish while the other guy's working one big bed fish. That can't happen.
But that's an ideal situation. That is an ideal situation.
Right.
Not always that way.
Not always that way. You're right.
You know as well as I do, you might run 200 miles of bank and then finally see one, and it's the only one you see on that bank.
Yeah. But when you're out in the abyss, when you're out in the middle,
right,
in no man's land, scoping trees.
Yeah.
First of all, you spend a lot of time just looking. Nobody's fishing.
Yeah.
And then when you do find one, and you got to try to chase it down and put the bait on, those other 2 guys are they're throwing blind into random open water trees. Like, I just don't get it, man. I don't know how you do that and keep people happy.
Ask Cody's opinion on that for his last 2 days of guide trips.
Well,
did you talk to him?
I talked to him yesterday, but not much, just at the boat ramp because I borrowed a seat from him.
He'll tell you the story about that.
But now I will say, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to put anything out there Cody doesn't want out there. But I know that yesterday was not a great fish catching day for him. I know that. So
yeah,
and I know
it's hard. Even when you're exceptionally good at it, I mean, it's still difficult. And then you got those fish, like he told me that you cast to them and they follow the dadgum bait. They kept following it, and you would hit it. And he said that happened all day long. They were follow the bait, and that can be a frustrating deal.
It's a lot like bed fishing, in that you really got to know when to move on. Like with a bed fish, like you got to the better you can get at looking at a bed fish and not even stopping on him because you can tell by his characteristics that he's not going to be real aggressive.
Right.
It's like that, but like even more so because you got to run a bait by him one time and be able to tell, okay, is this fish going to bite or not? And you can waste a lot of time.
And my theory to that is that, and he told me the baits he was using, and the one bait that I didn't hear from him was, and that's the only bait that I think works for that, is the fact you got to use a jerk bait, and you got to use a variety of jerk baits at different depths, so that when you see that fish and he's following it, you pause it and that thing stops and does something weird. Boom, that's when they hit it. If you're using a jig, or if you're using a crankbait, or if you're using a drop shot or a Texas rig, and they're going to follow it down or they're going to follow it to the boat. But I mean, when you stop that jerk bait a lot of times and it wiggles, boom, that's when they hit it.
I mean, we saw it last year. When you talk about this time of year, it's a jerk bait.
Yeah,
like those guys were here on Fork last year, this time of year. And all the scoping guys caught the majority of their fish on a jerk bait. There was a couple dudes that were glide baiting them a little bit, but a glide bait and a jerk bait are very similar, Dave, because the glide bait does this and then goes and stops. You know what I mean? Like a glide bait and a jerk bait, that bite is very similar. Like a glide bait essentially is a big bait version of a jerk bait in the way that you work it, or you can work it like that. So there's a lot of correlation between jerk bait bite and glide bait bite. But the jerk bait, that's the number one thing you've got to use this time of year. And by the way, every live scope winner on Lake Fork has used a jerkbait. There's only been 2 of them, but they both are jerkbait guys.
And it's the most difficult thing to use too for that game. And furthermore, when Patrick Walters won this tournament here, 2, 3, 4 years ago, you were in contact with him.
November of 2020. Yep.
In November, they caught 4 straight days of no wind.
They sure did,
which was phenomenal. Which was the most unbelievable thing for that time of year I've ever seen, which set up perfectly for throwing a jerk bait on those trees.
Well, and there wasn't not every, there was like a couple dudes in the field that were even doing it. Like not all the guys, not all the competitors, not most of them didn't even have it on their boat. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't like that was the tournament that put the live scope on the map, for the mainstream bass fishermen. That tournament expose them to live scope.
Right.
And yeah, no, that was a unique deal for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this time of year, you jerk bait, a minnow, and then I like this. JC just put this in here, and the first fish I ever caught on live sonar was on a spinnerbait. A spinnerbait will catch them on live sonar. I'll tell you what's cool about a spinnerbait is you can hover it. You can swim it up to them, stop, and shake it, and those blades just go, and the skirt's flaring, you know. Like you can kind of shake it. You can shake it like they shake a minnow with a spinnerbait. And it does work. I've used it. It was the very first one I caught on live sonar was on a spinnerbait. And I just happened to be going to spinnerbait. I just got in live sonar. I was looking around. I saw what looked like a fish sitting next to a stump. And it was just the easiest, to this day, the easiest live sonar catch I've ever had was my first one. And I could see the spinnerbait real easy on it because it's a big profile deal. And I rolled it up that stump. That fish falling off that stump. I stopped it, started shaking it, and he ate it. Just like I knew what I was doing. I've been doing it all. And that's the easiest, easiest live scope I ever had was that one. It was the first one, the very first one.
In recent years, though, the big game has been the Damiki rig as far as doing that in particular game. And based off of the weight that you're using on the head and the depth that you're seeing those fish in, you can take that Damiki rig and a certain line size and you'll watch it on the scope and you'll see it go down there, and you can use the tip of that rod to maneuver that thing and stop it and pause it, and it'll hold in that depth range right there enough to trigger that bite. Damiki rig, what they've been using, I say predominantly more, especially in the last year on those trees.
Well, you just call it minnow pinging, but that's what it is. It's they are hovering that bait on their heads. What they're doing, for sure. That's like I said, you can do that with Alabama rig. You can hover an Alabama rig over them a little bit. You can hover a spinnerbait pretty good. You can hover, jig head flukes and different things. The old underspin heads. You can do that. Casey Ashley did that back in the 2D sonar days on Lake Hartwell in the wintertime when it was real cold. Won a classic doing that. So you can do different things. It doesn't always have to be exactly like they're doing it. But, definitely the trend right now, the popular one is pinging that minnow, putting a little shad fluke style bait on
pinging the minnow.
Pinging the minnow.
On
that ping, baby.
Back to Fork, though, is following suit with what's going on right now. All this is going to somewhat change in some of these areas here coming up in the next 2 weeks, I would think. So all this stuff I'm on right now could end up changing drastically, and how these fish set up. And so it's time to evolve with what's going to happen and try to stay ahead of it if you can.
It's I think we've settled into a good deal now where it seems like we're just, the water temps in the shallow water are changing fast. But we've got like warm weather, but not like crazy warm overnight temps or anything like outrageous. So like we're kind of just on a little steady. Looks like what we're going to have is a little bit of steady increase in water temp going forward, leading up to that full moon in March. And we get to that full moon in March, it should be a daggum explosion, dude. Like
what's the date on that full moon?
March 14th, 2 weeks.
Okay, that's what I thought. 14th,
about 2 weeks, and it's gonna be. I think that's gonna be the. A really big. I think that and the full moon in April are both going to have really big waves. But I think the biggest wave is probably going to be this one in March. As long as that water is, in the lower to mid 60s all over the lake by then, which it should be with where it is now, then you'll have fish spawning top to bottom when that gets here, and it'll be on.
But they'll feed up prior to that full moon.
They will. They will. 100%.
Full moon is when they're setting on the beds.
Yeah, so they should be. They should. I think you'll have a few. I think you're going to have some that are going to spawn on this new moon in 2 days. The water is getting warm enough in certain select areas that you will have in those select areas. You'll have some spawning fish. You can probably bed fish some of those here in the next couple of days. But for the most part, it's going to be pre-spawn until you get to the 14th, and it should be a good pre-spawn. That's what I mean. Like the weather looks like it's going to be pretty stable right now. The forecast looks really stable for this time of year, and so. This next 10 days, you should have a very good pre-spawn bite. Very good pre-spawn bite, I would think.
Well, that's what I say tomorrow. Spaeth wants me to go with him tomorrow, and I'm thinking, I know that damn wind's going to blow that warm water out of those areas that I'm fishing, and I guess I almost have to go to double check and see if what I'm thinking is right, and see how it affects those areas where those fish are. And my guess is they should move to the first break line, but the key to go with that, and I told him, I said, it's going to be the barometer. If that barometer with this thing pumps up to 30, 20, I mean, that's going to make them definitely step out, and they won't be as cooperative as they are, have been in the last 3 days for sure, because I mean, we caught 60 bass in the last 2 days for sure, but I'll give you an example. The day after we got on the water, after that water was really, really cold, I was looking around the lake, everything, places in the backs of these pockets was 47, 48 degrees. And I'm throwing on them, no bites, no bites, no bites, no bites. And I went into another pocket that was 50.6. And I thought, so I'm slinging that trap around, and lo and behold, bam, caught a 7.5 pounder. But it was the only bite I had in 6 hours. And dealing with 47 to 50 degree water. Yeah. Now all of a sudden you get, and I told clients on the phone, I said, here this is, what was it, Saturday? It was Sunday, whatever the case, or it was Saturday. And I said, it's sunny. It's going to be sunny tomorrow. It's going to be sunny Monday. And I said, is it going to take 1 day or 2 days? Is it going to take 3 days? Well, what I discovered was that water warms insanely fast in 3 foot of water. It's amazing.
Water warms.
It's amazing. That sun heats it. It'll push it in there. That water warms. What I really figured is it takes 2 days for those fish to move to that. And by the 3rd day, it's game on. And that's what's happened here just in the last 2-3 days. I mean, there were places that I was fishing that they weren't there yet. Well, but today they were. And so that's just, I mean, that's a timing game. But if you already have a little bit of a head start on the way that, thinking process that, they should be here. This is what's happened the last 3 days. And that also goes in my guidebook and my notes, I can look at it later on down the road and say that this is what I need to be looking for here in the next 2-3 days.
Yeah.
So it's always good to have that, but also too, if that water pushes that warm water out of those pockets, that's going to go. I've already got it logged in from years back, but it'll be a newer log in there that, beware, it's going to move 4 or 5 degrees. We'll see tomorrow.
All right. Now, Big Money Dave, thumb in or thumb out when you're bowling?
I was thumb in. I was in the old school, guys.
Two-handed?
I was one-handed back then, but when I was 50, when I turned 50, I bowled the first two-hander, who is really the legend out there right now, Jason Balmani. I bowled against him and a kid named Asku Palermo from Norway or Finland, one of the two, at a tournament in Las Vegas called the A-Game. And these guys were both 21, 22 years old. And we got down to this elimination all the way to the final 4. And it was me, those 2 guys, and another guy. Well, I had to bowl Asku. And I mean, you talk about a devastating strike ball that nobody had ever seen in their life. But we were on a condition that was a little bit tougher, but they can override that condition. Well, I'm 50. I was 50 at the time, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm going to get my butt totally kicked right here because he's going to have a carry percentage that's better than mine. So the psychological game had to come out, and he gets up on one frame, and I know he's young, and he throws a bad shot. It's called a crossover, Brooklyn, and he strikes. Okay. So I get up on the right lane, and it's just me and him in that match, and it's best 2 out of 3. Well, I get up, and the bowling center is vacant. All right. There's nobody. Everybody's watching these matches, and I get lined up, cut a shot loose. I knew I threw it perfect. I started running it out down the lanes. I ran it out 20 lanes, screaming at the top of my lungs, see if that one goes, Brooklyn. And it just goes, pat, 10 in the pit. I turned around. This building was silent. I walked back down the concourse. I get back to the settee. No, there's not a word mumbled by nobody. I pick up the ball, go through my routine, get up on the left lane, cut the shot loose, run it out 20 lanes, pack, yelling at the top of my lungs. See if that one goes, Brooklyn. The kid cratered. He died right after that. He couldn't make a shot.
Oh my gosh.
So I just got in his head.
You had that in you.
I got in his head.
Somebody.
I got in his head enough because his physical ability, the dynamics of that strike ball is what's dominating the tour right now. There's a few guys out there that have big rev rates that are phenomenal athletes. And so back in my day, we didn't really have that much. Mark Roth, Marshall Holman, they were big legends, but in particular match that he had to play a little psychology. So I got to the title match against Belmonte, and he was 21 years old, and I win the first game. He wins the second game. Now the third game is for all the marbles, and it got down to the 10th frame, and he needed a hit in the 10th to win the tournament, and he got up there and gaffed it. He hit the nose, left 3-6-10, so I won the tournament. And afterwards, just the nicest kid you ever want to meet. 20, with the respectful. He's always been that way. And he come up to Mr. Ozio. I said, I just have to thank you so much. I said I was so nervous I couldn't even get it off my hand. And I mean, 21 years old, and the guy's a legend now. So it was. I've always liked him. Even I knew about him even when he was 17, 18, 19 years old from Australia. So
that's a great story, man. I would have never guessed that you had like the trash talking thing in you.
Well, there's times when you're making a living doing it, and you have to pull the tricks out. And hey, listen, I pull these tricks out in bass fishing all the damn time. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But I was very blessed to have that ability and to have a great career. And people don't even know that during that window of all those 30 years, I was still bass fishing 20 tournaments a year.
Yeah.
So I am a competitive freak. My wife says I am. She calls me a freak. She calls me a freak anyway, but
Joey Bell says that you owe us a Trump dance, so you got to give us a Trump dance. You guys go. Let's see it. You got to get some.
Who did the Trump dance?
We all do it. Like it's a tradition with the show. You got to, when you're a guest, you got to do the Trump dance. Well, you have to do it. Let's go.
Billy, remember, David got to do the Trump dance. He missed it last week. Oh, so I got to do it? Oh,
yeah, you have to do it. Let me see your Trump dance, Dave.
How does he do
it? We'll take it. We will take it. We'll take it. We'll absolutely take it. All right, I want to ask you one more question. What's the crazy dude, like the crazy person? Is a Pete something?
Pete Weber. Huh? Where's the sunglasses? Interesting story about Pete Weber.
Tell me your best, craziest Pete crazy guy story. Because if you don't know bowling, you need to go look up some of this dude's highlights because he is Pete Weber. He's a nut.
In 1991, started that year.
Hey, hold on, Dave. He's like the real life Ernie McCracken from what's that Kingpin or whatever.
Yeah. Pete Weber was a guy that always had somewhat of an issue with drugs, and he was a real skinny guy, in the talent level in that man was because his dad was a legend at the game also. And one of the all-time best of best. Well, Pete, he had the ability of bowling that he didn't even have to practice. It was such a natural ability where I didn't have that supernatural ability. I had to practice 200 games a week. I was a freak for wanting to be best that I could be. Well, in 1991, I started off the first year at Gable House Bowl in Torrance, and I won that tournament. All right, on national TV, and then we go to Las Vegas the next week to bowl at the Showboat, and I won that tournament also. So I started off the year with 2 major league wins, and that year, and so Pete finished up pretty high in them. So we fought back and forth all through the first half of the year, going towards Player of the Year. Well, I won another tournament in the summer, and then Pete was going along. Well, we were in this one city, and Pete had a problem that he liked to drink. All right, and so he would drink 6 beers or 5 beers, and he was so skinny that he couldn't handle the alcohol. Well, we're at a tournament, and we all had to bowl pro-ams. Well, Pete is down there bowling with the major sponsors of that bowling tournament. All right. And he is blitzed out of his brain. He's out there bowling, he's a belligerent drunk. He takes his shirt off. He's out there bowling without his shirt on and all this. And he ended up getting suspended from the PBA for 6 months, which opened the door for me to walk through the rest of the year. And I ended up making 6 telecasts in the fall and won one of those tournaments. I won the Chevy Truck Classic in order to get Player of the Year in 91. But it might not have been that way had Pete not have been that stupid.
Yeah. So some of his shortcomings allowed you to capitalize.
Allowed me to ride the train all the way.
Yeah.
Yep. So I got player of the year in 91.
Yeah, he was a crazy guy, man. I didn't know much about him. I never got into bowling. My grandfather was into bowling and was a good bowler in his own right, and played in the local league and all that stuff. And all I knew about bowling when I was a little kid was when I was at Mama and Papa's, that meant that we were going to the bowling alley on whatever league night that was. I got to go to the arcade for a few hours. You know, So that's what I know about bowling. But
I could write a book. I could write a book on the interesting things that happened on the tour for 30 years.
Oh yeah,
just the most damnedest thing. I mean, the most bizarre things you'd ever imagine when you're traveling. We stayed in hotels all the time. We had guys we roomed with, in order to split the costs and all that mess.
Mm-hmm.
But I look back. Listen, I thank the Lord every day that I got that opportunity to do it at that level. And the year that I stopped, I was 2008. I was player of the year on 2 senior tours. And I ended up having a wrist surgery because I had a problem with bone on bone in my wrist, and it just never worked out. So it actually pushed me off the tour. And I was 54 by then, and I was like, 30 years, I've had enough. So I dedicated everything to fishing. And, I just do the same with bass fishing that I did as my work regime, my regiment. Dedication to the sport is the same thing as what it was in bowling.
Okay, we have been demanded to answer this comment because the boss, Lisa Ozio, wants to know who calls you a freak.
Is that my wife? You do, damn
it. We just saw her walk by a little while ago.
I can't believe she's on there.
Yeah.
She calls me a freak. I don't know.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Yeah.
Great lady.
I remember my grandpa, he would watch some of the bowling stuff, and lo and behold, I didn't know he's probably watching you. But Pete Weber, it was always, as a kid, you always notice him because he would scream so loud and just, he was such a out there character. But he's like literally the only guy I could name from back then just because I didn't really watch it. But it'd be on in the background as I was around the house or whatever. And that guy would always act such a fool, you'd notice him,
Well, I built my career. I was probably on ABC Wide World of Sports and ESPN probably about 80 times in my career on TV. Yeah. And the arena events were the ones that were really, really fun. And if you go back and look in 1995, I won the Dick Weber Classic and broke the record for the highest 4 games ever bowled on TV. Was in 1995. Well, Lisa and my 2 daughters, one was, I think, 4 and the other one was 7 years old or something like that. Maybe a little bit older. Maybe the youngest one was 5. I don't remember, but it was a fantastic time, as far as that goes. And they were there to support it. And it was a cool deal. To be in an arena event with, 5,000 people there. And we had a lot of those events. And to be able to win in that environment was great.
I've heard it kind of makes sense. Like, it seems like professional bowling and professional fishing, like a lot of similarities there as far as like kind of the size of the market, how you have to have sponsors involved to make a good living, all that kind of stuff seems to be pretty similar. Is there a lot with you having been on the inside, obviously, you think there's a lot of similarities between like professional tour fishing and PBA
or tour fishing? Yeah, tour fishing compared to bowling is exact because I was with sponsored by bowling ball companies and shoe companies. I did commercials for Dexter shoes. I did commercials for Columbia.
And you have to make a good living. You have to do that, right?
And then we had bonuses for television whenever you were on there. That if you used a certain ball or certain things, they had what's called incentives. And so they paid the players incentives just because they already were using their equipment. And that was the part of what really substantiated your survival too was because bowling it isn't not even close to being comparable to golf even back then with the amount of money that they play for and make so if you have a $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 year that was a big thing back then and you could make another $100,000 to $200,000 in incentives if you really did well as far as that goes so but nowadays I don't even know it's split up so much. The one benefit that the players have now that we really, when I was getting out, we just had it, was being able to bowl internationally. I won the tournament in Saudi Arabia. I won a bar of gold, was first place in that thing. And they flew us over. They paid us for being there, and they only brought over 12 guys, and we bowled against ourselves in match play. And then they had the national team of amateurs, some of them from all over the world, and they were there. And so I took a picture with the guy from Qatar who won that side, and then I won the other side. And that was made the cover of Bowling Magazine, all the bowling magazines, and I was biting on the gold bar.
Do you still have the gold bar? Or did you sell it?
Oh, no, I sold it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, many years ago. Yeah. But I wished I did. It'd be worth way more now than what it was then.
You probably should have held on to that one.
Yeah, but the benefit of being in that career, I mean, I got to travel the globe. I've been to so many places around the world. It aggravates my wife, and she's listening right now, that we'll be sitting watching TV, and there'll be a deal right there in Germany, the Brandenburg Gate or something. And I said, I've been there. And she'll get pissed. Or somewhere in Japan. She went to Japan with me twice, and then Switzerland, all over the world. The only place I've never been to is New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah.
So
that's cool, man. It's definitely cool.
Blessed.
I think this is the most we've ever talked about it. Even me, you, one-on-one, we've never talked this much about it.
I don't talk about it. Now, it's in the past.
Yeah, you don't talk about it much. You open up.
I'm not an egomaniac with it. I had a great career. It was fun. The Lord blessed me with it. And I'm so focused in fishing and trying to be the best that I can be, and, help people to be better fishermen themselves. And at least on a guide day, even if it's not a fantastic day, hopefully they learn something, and that will help them in future. And then they can call me anytime. And matter of fact, I've had one guy I'm booked here with, and another, he's probably listening tonight. Matter of fact, we're trying to get him hooked up with the right medium heavy rod and all this. And we've been talking back and forth here for the last couple of days, trying to get him squared off with that and teaching him how to do some different tricks with some equipment, So we go to that length. That's not a big deal. I mean, it's part of the game of educating people and help them to be better than they currently are. And that's what your job is. Your job's putting on something right now that's going to benefit these people, to help them to be better than they are. And if we don't accomplish that, we've failed. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I coach all my kids in sports, and it's really, the longer I do this, it's, the title is fishing guide, but essentially you're a fishing coach. It's what you are, to some degree or another. Like, you're either coaching them how to get what they want out of that one day, but a lot of times, dude, you're coaching people on how to get better and teaching them things they'll use in perpetuity going forward, whether it's fishing weekend tournaments or high school tournaments or whatever they choose to do. But you're actually, training and coaching guys on a day at a time basis and giving them stuff that they will use in perpetuity.
Yeah. Strangely enough, I mean, like the guys yesterday, they had a blast. They had an absolute blast. But there's times when I've been, like, say we have a 3 or 4 or 5 fish day, which is but the at the end of the day, they'll come up and say, that was really interesting. They like the fact to see what you're thinking. They see the smoke coming out your ears as the day is progressing, and you're thinking this, and you're thinking, well, then if they're doing this, why? And I know that they should be doing this. And we're going through all the regiments of the different patterns, checking different things, going to different locations, burning $70 worth of gas in order to try to put the puzzle together for what Mother Nature delivered us that day. And it don't always work out perfectly, but I mean, our job is to try to manifest it in a way that we can be the best that we can be that day. And if we don't go that extra mile, then I don't know. Listen, I bowled for a career, and second place was first loser. So I just don't want to be first loser at fishing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird deal with us, because I think, I know you're a competition guy, and I'm a competitive competition guy, and most of us are. And, we don't have a weigh-in at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like, we don't get to go really kind of measure and see, but kind of, I'll tell you one thing that I honed in on and for a long time was how busy could I stay? How busy could I stay as far as having bookings, and all that was kind of how I competed in my own little headway or whatever. And now that's not so much what I do. I don't really get tied up about that, but yeah, we find little ways to make it competitive, and we still care about catching. Like, I guarantee you, dude, like, I felt like, as I struggled the last couple of days when I didn't feel like I should struggle, or just didn't live up to expectations. It's not like we caught zero. It's not like we went out there and sucked, but just didn't live up to what I thought the day should be. It made, like, you feel terrible. Like, I felt terrible after the last couple of days. I will say, did something right in there, because the guys booked 2 more trips in April. So they want to come back.
I get more and more and more of them telling me, he said that, you worked your ass off today. Yeah. Is what they'll say. And I mean, even a poor day, if the blood pressure is high and, and if the worst case scenario is the barometer's high, it's slick and it's bluebird as hell. I mean, you better strap it on. It's going to be hard that day, and you gotta really, and that's why I go to those lighter lines and I go to deals where we can just get bit. And if we happen to snag a 5 or 6 pounder in that process, and it's praise the Lord. And that's why we use the drop shot a lot in those cases. And now we get a day where we can throw a little bit more aggressive, like a chatterbait, or like Mike's talking, those big swim baits, or something where you can swing for the fence. The day has to allow that. But even on that, you don't have to hit it perfectly, and you can still go 4 hours without a bite. And so that's why that I'll go in order to try to get some fish in the boat for the day, and then just go from there.
Dave, we're going to answer before we do this. I want to say, folks, if I seem like I'm like a little bit down and out or sad, I'm not. I've been fighting allergies really bad this week, and I told the guys they've had some allergies have held off better. I literally texted you and Mike beforehand. I was like, hey, y'all may have to carry this deal, because like I was sneezing and I wasn't sure I was going to have to be muting my camera just so I could sneeze and blow my nose. But held out okay. But I am kind of like got all the congestion and itchy eyes and all that going on. So I apologize if my demeanor hasn't been as enthusiastic as y'all have come to expect from me tonight.
Oh, Billy suffers from FOS syndrome. So
FOS?
FOS syndrome.
What's that?
Yeah. So you don't know what FOS is?
No.
Full of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
To answer Brad's question, Brad, if you enjoy throwing a drop shot, let's get this. I mean, Billy knows about this lake that I take people to, and Power Plant Lake, and the drop shot there is magnificent during like October and November. And I mean, it's the best place to learn the feel. Now, you won't catch a lot of 5, 6, 7 pounders type of thing. You're going to catch a lot of rats and a lot of small ones, some 2 and 3 pounders, some 1 pounders. You catch a variety of them. But this year, it was the strangest thing. This year in October, November, we averaged 150 bass a day, every day. And it was the damnedest thing. I mean, I was like, whoa. I thought they dumped a truck and pulled up a truck of nothing but 1 pound or 2 pound bass and dumped them off in the lake, because I thought this is the first time this has ever happened. And I mean, that lake, in another 2 years from now, oh God, I don't know what's going to happen. They're going to run out of shad.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, got plenty of bloom in that lake too, so they can graduate and move on to eating those, I guess.
That was amazing. I had 2 guys that they asked me what the boat record was. And I said, well, the current boat record was established at Monticello probably right before they closed it, 6, 7 years ago, and was 201. And so their goal was to break that record, and they ended up getting 216 in one day.
Wow.
We counted everyone up. Wow. So to answer your question, that's really the best time to catch numbers. Now, I use drop shots on fork pretty much year round. And I mean, I'll give you an example, like today. Yesterday, especially in this one in particular area where we were throwing these Cincos, I might go to a 3/16 weight, use about a 3-inch leader on the drop shot from weight to hook, and then put on the straight tail worm. That serves a really neat purpose for throwing that drop shot up in that 1 to 2 foot of water, is that with that light weight, you can ease it through that junk that they have on the bottom. And even when you sneak up to some coontail grass or something like that, the bait still stays neutrally buoyant. And so, man, it works fantastic. I've won a couple of 2 or 3 tournaments on fork with that same strategy of using a drop shot with a very short leader. Now, certain times of year, like January, for example, I was out catching fish in anywhere from 22 to 35 foot of water and using a leader that was, substantially longer with a red crawler robo worm, and didn't have any problem getting bit out there at all during the latter part of January, the early part of February. Mm-hmm. And so, but I keep records on this because I used to fish all those under tournaments at Fork for years. And usually when you get to about the first 10 days of February, those little fish, or those fish in general that were out there in that 20 to 35 foot of water, they leave. They're gone. And I mean, it's the strangest thing. They don't spawn. Some of those small ones don't spawn. So why would they move? It might be instinct.
This is an interesting question. And I'll take this one at first, and you can follow up. How do you deal with customers that get upset when you catch a bigger fish than they do from the same area / spot and on the same bait? Completely even playing field, basically. So you're out there fishing, and if you're fishing a spot like an offshore spot, and you're throwing the same bait as your customer on the juice, then you're wrong as a fishing guide. You should not be doing that. Yeah. You should, my deal is, and even if we're fishing an area, a shallow area, if we're in Long Branch, because we talked about it a lot tonight, we're back in the back corner of Long Branch, and my customer's throwing a chatterbait, there's zero chance I'm throwing a chatterbait.
Me too.
Yeah, if I'm throwing, if he's throwing a chatterbait, I'm throwing a trap or swim bait or Cinco or whatever. Now, if I get 2 bites on the bait I'm throwing and he hasn't gotten any, he's getting the bait I've been throwing.
I do the same thing.
That's what's happening. So this scenario, to me, if a fishing guide is really doing his job, should never really play out. Because if you're out there on a spot offshore, you should not be throwing the same bait as your customer on the juice. If you're in an area, you shouldn't be throwing the same bait as your customer anyway. And when you get a couple bites, they should get the one that's getting bit more, not you. So that scenario should just not really happen, honestly. That's my opinion on it. That's just my opinion.
I'm not doing the same thing that my customers are doing, and I'll do something different. It depends on how the bite ratio is going and how the bite is for the day so far. And if it's a struggle bus day, then I'm going to be doing something what I've got them doing, what I think is going to be necessary to catch fish, and then I'm going to say do something.
Trying things out.
And I got burned on this yesterday. Matter of fact, yesterday I had my clients throwing, like I said, the Texas rig baits up on an inside grass line on a certain location, and quite a bit, hour went by, whatever, and they did catch some, and I'm thinking, I'm looking at the graph, and I'm looking at the time and all this, and looking at the sun, I'm thinking, these things ought to hit a trap by now. And so I reached down, I picked up a trap, first cast, I throw it out there. Now
that's gonna happen. You're gonna have those fish catches where you're gonna have days where no matter what bait you put in their hand and your hand, you're gonna outfish them. Like that is going to happen. That is part of the equation. So that's not that big a deal. This guy Blake Doty says we were on dock skipping jigs. Well, brother, my opinion. This is just my opinion. Every guy has the right to do their thing their way. If we're skipping jigs on docks, after I've caught a couple out from under a dock to show them the pattern's working.
Same thing. I want to make sure the pattern works. That's right.
Because I know that pattern's working. I've given them confidence. They're the ones fishing, not me.
That's right.
And I may mess around and take a shaky head, throw it out in the open water out in front of the dock, or I may do something to kill the time while they're fishing with something else on the outside edge of the dock or outside of it somewhere. But I'm not. If I know those fish, if we're patterning them underneath the dock, and we've got a couple bites, I'm not putting my bait under that dock once we've gotten a couple bites.
Exactly. Yeah. I have to prove first that we can get bit.
Yeah, you got to build the confidence.
And I mean, I'll throw, and especially in the early, and as soon as I can see that to substantiate the pattern and make sure I'm doing the right thing, and then as soon as they give it, then I put the rods down and let them go. Now, if we go an hour and a half, and all of a sudden they're not getting bit, and I've had this happen before where they're not exactly working it right, or they're working it too fast. I had to slow the guy I had down today. I had to slow him down 2 or 3 times. I had to slow the guys down yesterday. I said, look at this thing. We're dealing with 56, 57 degree water, and you're working this thing like it's the middle of the summer. I said, and he said, oh, dog, man. I said, if you think you're going slow, go 5 times slower than that. Yeah. And then you'll start getting bit. So, and we both think the same thing. I mean, and then as soon as they get to where the pattern's substantiated and they're really catching them, then I don't need to pick up a rod.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I'm not, I'm assuming so. Blake's guide, and I'm not sure where exactly Blake is at. I know I've seen his name. I know he's watched channel, watched Facebook for a long time. I've seen his profile on Facebook and stuff. So, and I appreciate him watching it. So you're guiding now, Blake, and I'm not trying to talk down to you or tell you you're doing something wrong. I'm just telling you that that's what I would do. And there's going to be times when you catch a bigger one than your customer, and as long as you honestly have the best intention for your customer and you're trying to get them on the fish more so than yourself, then if that customer gets mad, tell them don't call you back. Because you're trying. You did everything you could. If you really did everything you could to make sure they caught the fish and you just so happen to catch it, and that guy's still mad, tell him don't call you back. He goes on the do not answer list. I've got a do not answer list, and it's not very long, but I got one.
I got one too. But to answer Jeffrey's question, I have plenty of clients that let say, "Man, we want you fishing." I'm like, "Really?"
They want you to fish with them and want to kind of learn that way. Then that's a whole different deal, man. Like, and I'll say this: I will still try to point out little things, obviously if you're bed fishing, I'm not going to catch the biggest bed fish today. I'm gonna try and make them catch it if I can. If they can get it done, I'm gonna try and have them catch the bigger bed fish. If we're jig fishing a creek channel bend, I'm gonna tell them, hey dog, that stump right over there, you might want to throw it that one before I do. You know what I mean? So even when I'm fishing with them, I'm still trying to guide them to get the bigger bites to get more bites and bigger bites if I can. But when somebody, if you're on a grass flat or just fishing a shallow area or fishing a long point and somebody says, hey, we want you to fish with us and we want you to fish hard. Let's just pretend we're buddies and we're fishing. All right.
Do it.
Here we go.
And a lot of times, and I've done this. I've done this the last 2 days. I'll pick up the guy today that I was with is a regular client of mine, been that way for 12 years. And he'll look up there and I got all these rods on the deck and I'm picking up these rods and going through these rods cyclical, just bang, bang, and throwing certain target. I'll see something that I think this is going to be better match for it. And I'll throw it on that. And I'm trying to put a pattern, a puzzle together in my head in order. And then finally I got that puzzle put together today. And what I do is I gave him my rod with that in particular bait on it. And I had said, here, throw this and throw it right there. And as soon as he did, he caught 4 or 5 immediately, as far as that goes, and so he's coming off an illness and, he's been struggling. He hadn't been on the water now in probably 3 weeks or more. And he was a little bit rusty. He had that rod flying a little too high after he got those things stuck and, they jumped off. And I said, look, dog, stick it. And then as soon as you get him hooked good, just roll your rod down, keep tension on it, roll it down low. And so that you can create negative angle. And he finally got back into the thick of things. And then he started landing fish one after another, so it's a teaching process. It's a learning, but you want to keep them steered in the right direction, but you got to have all the tools there in order to put the patterns together.
My buddy here, Doug Renner, says he likes his guys to hold him sometimes. David, is that a service? And Cody says that you offer that service, Dave, just so you know. Cody Brown says you will hold your customers if they want to be held sometimes.
I don't know if I'm going that far. Oh, Maze. Hey, Maze, you called me earlier today. We had 2 when you called me. We ended up with 25.
So, Blake Doty, you said, so are we running the trolling motor in the situations where we don't even have a rod in our hand? Absolutely, yeah. Still run the trolling motor, even if I'm not fishing and I've just got the customers fishing. And so usually if I'm not fishing at all, we've got it dialed in. We're dialed, they're whacking them, we're catching them pretty quick. And yes, I'm running the trolling motor, I'm working the power poles in the spot lock. When we get hooked up, I'm working the net. I'm, we're doing all that, right? We're doing everything we can to just make those customers catch as many fish as we can, get the bait back in the water fast as we can, get the pictures done quick, and keep it moving. But yeah, 100%. I don't know that I've ever had a customer take over the trolling motor in my boat, ever. I don't know. If I did, it'd have to be somebody I knew really well, and I don't think it's ever happened. It might have, but I don't think I've ever had that happen.
Yeah, we were poled down. We were poled down in a spot today and caught 20 with the poles down. So I could have just sat in the driver's seat.
Now, in that situation, when you drop the poles, I'll go sit down and kick my feet up whenever you
Yeah. I told him I was sitting in the back chair today. I said, I can only remember ever in my lifetime ever sitting in a back seat only one other time in all these years, 15 years. I was like, that's uncomfortable. I want to tell him, you go ahead and run the troll motor. I ain't worried about it.
So the coolest example I have of that was we had a deal. We had a bite it was in the dog days of summer. And David, you'll know kind of where this area is. We fished it together, on the same days it several times, but not in the last few years, but a while back. But I had a hump, and I had this big grass flat with some drains and all that, and there was a hump in it. It had, the drain had no grass or very little scattered grass, and on top of the hump, that hump had a lot of grass on it. And we could pull up out beside that hump and power pole down and throw up to that hump and fish baits across and off the edges of that hump. And they were there every morning. They were there every morning. Now, at that time, you weren't back in there. I was the only one back in there on that little stretch. But it was a while, like several weeks, where we would start there in the morning, and I would go up there and power pole down and hand my customers a rod, and I would sit down in the passenger seat and grab the net and unfold it and sit there and hold the net over the edge of the boat and let them throw up on that hump, have them reel a fish to me. I'd scoop it, unhook it, hand it to them, take a picture, boom. I mean, I was just sitting down, grabbing fish, handing it like it was that good. I knew we were going to catch them on that hump every morning, and I would literally sit in the passenger seat with the net hanging over the side of the boat, ready to go, so we could just net them as fast as possible, unhook them, take a picture, and get them back going. Because you know how those deals are. The faster you can get the bait back in there, the more you can catch.
Right. It's a narrow window. It's a very narrow window.
I would literally pull up every morning, hand those guys rods, and go sit down there like, what are you doing? I'm like, hey, throw right over there. You'll see.
Was that during the shad spawn?
No, this was like dog days of summer.
Oh, dog days of summer. Oh, that's right.
So there was a big flat area with grass in it. And there was a drain, like a wide drain that ran down there, and it had like the grass scattered out in that wide drain and kind of down towards almost to the end of it, but not quite. There was a hump, kind of just a little bit higher spot where the grass got thick. So we would power pull down in the drain and throw up on top of that hump of that grass, and they would be on that hump every morning. Just
drop me a pin on that, okay?
You know exactly where it is. You've seen me catch fish off of it. Yeah.
All right. Well. Any more questions, guys? Look, it's getting closer to my bedtime.
Yeah, it's probably a good place to wrap it up. My eyes started itching a little while ago. It'll be a matter of time for the next allergy surge hits me, and I might start sneezing on camera. So I might ought to call Well Enough Good and get on out of here before that happens.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if that, which I already know what's going to happen, but I have to look and see how hard that wind's going to blow out of the north tomorrow. I'm really interested to see, again, how much it changes the water temp in those north-facing pockets. And so it's going to be really an experiment tomorrow just to prove that I'm right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm sure you will be. You usually you'll figure out some kind of way to do it. You've been doing it good here lately for sure. So, man, I appreciate you joining us as always, Dave. You gonna be good to go next Wednesday, probably?
Oh yeah.
Good. Well, hey man, big shout out to David and Mike and our lost souls over here in the comments. He couldn't make it tonight, but he just got here and he's down in the comments. He's making fun of me for fishing out of my 2-man boat on Monticello. He's trying to say I'm a kayak fisherman now. I'm a fishing hippie.
You know what? He gives us both crap.
Bro, it can't be considered a kayak when I can put 2 fat dudes in there and have no balance issues. That's not a kayak, dog. It's not. I've got 600 pounds of man meat in this thing and ain't nobody falling out. It's not a kayak, you know?
That's right.
So that's it. Well, hey, man, thanks to all the viewers. Appreciate you. Remember, when it's Wednesday night, what night is it, David?
Guide night.
It's Guides night on Wednesday night, man. We will see you guys next Wednesday. Thank y'all for watching. And, that's it.
All right, people. Take care.
All right, Dave. Thanks.
Bye-bye.